Hello, my fellow Westorians. It's Monday. It's time to have a spoiler-free review of the final episode of Season 1 of House of the Dragon. It was, I'd say, a great success. Certainly there are some criticisms, but mostly we have great praise for the show. We will be coming back next Monday to discuss how much we liked it. And then the following Monday, we will be discussing more of a traditional wrap-up where we analyze the season as a whole. Going beyond that, we haven't exactly figured out our schedule. We have been having spoilery episodes on Saturdays. That's over with for now, but we will be having other spoilery content. We just haven't announced when it's going to be out yet. So you may have noticed by next Monday, I said we'll have an episode. That's Halloween, so it'll be a fun Halloween stream. So we have some guests lined up, which we will announce once the full list is set. We're trying to have a little extra group since it's going to be a little more fun-oriented and a little bit less analytical. A little dress up, yeah.
I'll make you dress up on Halloween. It's
a good idea.
Sean, too.
Let me interject. I was pretty happy with the tweet I made when the painted table lit up. I tweeted that was the jack-o'-lantern we didn't know we needed.
Yes, that's right. That's true. Good timing. I wonder if they realized how well that was timed on their end.
Yeah.
Make sure to check out our synopsis videos before each live stream or after if you decide to do it in that order. It's valid to do that, but I
usually
think
it's after if you're watching the video.
That's true. The video usually comes out after. The audio version of the synopsis is out first. But the video portion takes longer to make. Of course, video editing is a lot longer process than audio editing. Thanks to Dragon Lord Eric the Evening Shade, Lord of the Groves and Defender of Stygi, rider of Ixodes Scapularis the Bloodthirsty, a dragon with purple scales and wings, a red underside, black horns, and green eyes. This episode had a lot of dragon in it, didn't it? Maybe, I would guess, I'd say it's the most dragony. Obviously, even if you take out the quantity of dragon stuff, just the amount of time spent on Vhagar and Arax, I just mean like the vibe, the dragon vibes, like the overtones of meta communication, the Damon basically kind of acting like a dragon throughout most of the episode, and just the fact that we saw a lot of dragons, and there seems to be some like nonverbal communication, maybe supernatural elements. We'll talk about these things individually, but there's a lot of it. And that
there might have been as much dragon time on screen this episode as all of the episodes combined. Not sure if that's quite true, but it's got to be close.
It's entirely possible. We did say that same thing the first time they had a long Vhagar scene with Aemond claiming her, and we're like, this is more dragon action than they've had the whole show so far. I think you're still right though, even saying that.
And I don't really feel like it's at the expense of anything else either. You know, I feel like just as much tension and drama and character and dialogue and everything else.
Yeah, and even in that, it wasn't just gratuitous, like two dragons going at it. It was tense. It was like, oh my God, he's losing control. This isn't what he intended. Like he was being an ass, but he wasn't trying to kill him or whatever. You know, that's interesting. Like it's not like, well, they fought and then one of them won. You know, it's not. It's a totally different sort of thing. Yeah, it's not really. You don't even look at it as like a fight. You know,
going into this, you know, when this show was pending, like my worst fears, my biggest, most pessimistic concerns have not been there at all. Like all the things I was worried they might do, they're doing all the opposites.
That's right. Yeah,
I love it.
Well, there's still time for them to. No, I'm just kidding. Next season, they can just nothing but action, no dialogue at all, no character building. Yeah.
I think I heard someone call it Damon's run is like my least favorite part of the whole series, and it wasn't a dragon thing. You know, I was worried there might be like too much dragon action, and it wouldn't be realistic enough, and it would be at the sacrifice of character development stuff. But even that, I think it's adding to character development.
Even that episode, it was billed as like there's gonna be a lot of action in the Stepstones, but it was really just like the last 10 minutes of after like the 50 minutes of the hunt and the white heart and the prophecy and the great speech in front of the fire and all that. Yeah, you're totally. Yeah, I'm totally with you there. What are you drinking today, Sean? I've got myself a coffee as usual, but it's in a Star Wars mug instead of my usual thermos. So you know, whoo, big change.
I have another murky mix here.
That is murky.
Where I don't want to commit to red or green, so I'm or black / red or green. I've mixed them. This is the raspberry. What do you call that? The sparkling ice, the naked green machine, and rainbow bang.
Whoa,
which I don't even know what flavor it is because it mixes with all this other stuff.
So you don't take color sides when it comes to colors. When the blacks, greens, you just pour it all together in one cup.
I mean,
drink it all whole.
We all know Sean's team pink, though.
That's true.
That's right.
Team pink.
That's right.
In case y'all didn't know, that's his actual last name. Yeah. So, we will. Well, I will be in New York on October 27th for the George R. Martin Neil Gaiman event. Shay will be in New Jersey on November 3rd for the George R. Martin Kevin Smith event, and all three of us. Right, Sean? You're going to be there in December? We'll be at Game of Thrones Creation Entertainment Convention in Los Angeles in December. So if you're going to be at any of those, let us know. Yeah. All right. Anthony DePalma sends a super chat. No question. Appreciate that, Anthony. Divine Miss Z says, did y'all see the painted table said Grey Tower Watch instead of Greywater? I did not.
I did see that, and I'm like, well, is there any room for Greywater Watch to have been renamed? Probably not.
Map makers make mistakes all the time.
Yeah, that's also true.
I was going to say there's a lot of room for them to just not have the map right. Like, I mean, probably in reality, it was an error.
But
some detail of the showrunners. But I think it's very reasonable for people in that world to not exactly know the name of every item and place.
You can write this off as an in-world mistake, unlike, say, a Starbucks cup.
Well,
like that you just can't write off.
It's like, one it's harder to write off is there's also Summerhall on the map.
Well, there would be the ruins of Summerhall, right?
Well, Summerhall wouldn't exist.
Summerhall wasn't built yet. Oh my God,
hadn't
you're
been built
right.
yet, but
That's
it's on the
mistake.
map.
There's no way around.
That's when you can't. It's
you can still have that. It's not a castle. The location is called that. Maybe there was like a building there.
Yeah, I mean, you can.
Also, Viserys could have had a dream. Aegon could have had a dream. They might know that castle's coming. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, you're right. It's all about the dreams. Totally. He dreamt of Summerhall, and so they put it on the map. He didn't know what he was really dreaming of. He was like, "Oh my God, that's what I was dreaming of." Crap. All right, let's do our 3x3. Last week's Facebook poll. The winner was not a big surprise. I think Olivia Cook, 43%. Eve Best, 24%, and Tom Glencarney, that's Aegon, 10%. Those are the three I picked in order. So I was very much in sync with y'all, at least those of y'all in our Facebook group on the voting there. So that's cool. This week, I encourage you to join our discussions on Facebook or Discord. Those are the main places you can interact with us, but also Twitter and email are valid ways to hit us up. I had a tough call this time, Emma Darcy or Matt Smith, and I went back and forth on them. And I'm going to go with Matt Smith because I hadn't picked him at any of these weeks. I figure that's a valid enough tiebreaker when this is all just for fun anyway. And I've picked Rhaenyra, both actors, multiple times. So I figured, he's hit a lot of seconds and thirds and fourth places. So he was so close this time. I'm going to go ahead and knock it down for him.
I'm going to go ahead and say same thing for the same reason.
Really? Yeah.
I felt like there wasn't quite anyone in this episode that particularly stood out among the others. And Matt Smith has been second or third a bunch of times, so this is my chance to pick him too.
Cool. All right. And Shay, what about you?
I'm coming out Team Aemond versus both of you saying Damon.
Nice.
I particularly appreciate. I know Ewan Mitchell didn't have a whole lot as Aemond this episode, but the final shot with him realizing what he had done, like the subtleties of that performance, him when he was trying to like bully Luke in Storm's End, and you can just tell that like he is still torn up about his own childhood bullying. I don't know. Like I'm picking Ewan Mitchell as Aemond, but it really is just as much a credit to Leo Ashton's Aemond that made me care about Ewan's Aemond right here. Ultimately, like it was the legwork of the children that worked for me.
He has that like barely contained rage that goes back to like serenity and immediately to rage again. Like it's like you were keeping that in really well until you weren't, and now
he was a close pick for me too. Yeah. Like as I said, there's a bunch I liked, and I almost picked him for kind of the same reason you said, because a lot of what he did was kind of subtle, and I feel like I want to draw attention to it, but I think we're going to draw a bunch of attention to it anyway, so
yeah, you're right.
We'll have plenty of time to name Aemond in season 2. I think we'll have some good times.
Highlight plot / scene. I'm going to say the painted table preparation, all the lighting of the candles and the music and the procession of her walking in. That was very cool. It's very cinematic. That's something I noted about this episode. It's the most cinematic of the 10 episodes so far, the closest to being like a movie with its presentation and some of the just like glorious music and acting and scenic combinations.
I really like how they featured the coals and how the coals lit things up.
Oh, Sean loves when they feature coals. Wow.
Those were very crispy coals. Shay, what was your favorite highlight plot/scene?
I really liked the scene with Corlys and Rhaenys speaking with one another, because I'd been I had low expectations for what we might get with Corlys and Rhaenys, and I really liked Corlys bringing up, like, Rhaenyra killed our son. I liked all of that. I wasn't as much a fan of then him just coming and swearing to her. I don't really feel like the payoff was there for Corlys to make that flip. Like, he literally just brought up, she killed our son. Like, I can only imagine that Corlys and Rhaenys don't think that. I don't know.
Well, she's supporting Rhaenyra, not Damon, I think, is kind of the point there. Like, he can kind of separate them in his mind. Like, she didn't kill. You know, she's like, she's complicit, is what they said. You know, like Damon
it's a stretch
did
for me. It's a stretch for me, but I appreciated Corlys bringing up his reservations about this Laenor death. So, like, I appreciated that scene, and I really, in general, appreciated Corlys recognizing that he was not a good husband, and him kind of taking responsibility for all that. And so I'm curious to see where that goes in season 2 with how their relationship continues to play out and what scenes we get with the two of them, I guess. So.
Right on.
That was my thought there too. Well, even if it maybe was a stretch, I feel like Corlys was supporting Rhaenys there.
Yeah.
Not so much Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
And Rhaenys is like, no, we got to do this. He's like, okay, well, I'm with you then. You know.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're
and it's their grandchildren. That's like an inescapable part of this. That's their children or grandchildren that are involved. It's the side they're taking. So it's the side their family is still on. So highlight dragon bit. I'll say.
Wait,
oh, I'm sorry, I skipped
mine.
yours. My bad. Go ahead.
It's okay. I did interject for.
Yeah, that's
kind of
what I was thinking there.
Mine was a kind of it happened kind of quick, but there's a moment when Rhaenys is sitting at the painted table. We're kind of seeing her profile, and all the men are standing around, and it's the background noise is kind of subdued. Something I appreciate. They play with the audio a lot, and you could just hear them squabbling over who's going to die and what's going to happen in a battle. And she's almost removed from it. You know, she's like hearing this talk all around her. I think it was right in there when Rhaenys was saying, Rhaenyra is the one talking to Corlys. Rhaenyra is the one holding the realm together. All the men standing around wanting war, and she's stopping it. You know, and I thought it was a really good moment they had, just of her sitting at the table with all these old white men talking about how they're going to conduct war. She just doesn't want to hear it. She doesn't want war at all.
Yeah.
It was a real quick moment. It only lasted like maybe 2 seconds.
That's a great call out.
An image.
And you're and Sean, I want to draw something you may not be aware of. In the behind the scenes, Eve Best said that was one of the moments that turned her character around for Rhaenyra. One of the reasons she didn't burn everyone at the coronation was because there are several reasons. One of them that we didn't mention was that she wasn't sure Rhaenyra was going to be a good enough leader. She's like, I don't want to necessarily throw my lot in with this side if I can't trust her leadership. But that moment where she had that restraint, it wasn't coward, and she recognized it wasn't cowardice, it was restraint. Right? Like if it was cowardice, that would be more examples of poor leadership. But it was restraint, and she was like, restraint. That's a good quality in a leader, and that was something that helped turn her around on that. So I thought that was pretty important.
Interesting, Alicent was exercising that same restraint.
Yeah.
Trying to, you know, and there's a lot of parallels here between what Alicent and Rhaenyra are doing. All the men around Alicent are like, all right, let's go to war now. All the men around Rhaenyra are like, all right, let's go to war now. And the two of them are both trying to stop it.
Yeah. Highlight dragon bit. I wrote in the notes, A New Hope opening scene. Because, yes, my favorite moment of this episode is the opening sequence to Star Wars A New Hope. No, what I mean by that is that when Vhagar passes over Arax, it's like the opening scene of A New Hope when the Star Destroyer is just overwhelming Leia's ambassadorial ship,
or whatever,
which is also an embassy. It's also supposed to be like a diplomatic mission, and there's even a Luke involved.
That's right.
So that's where, even though it's sad, we're laughing. It's like, aha, Luke, who dies 3 minutes later. But anyway, yeah, that really gave me. It's not the only Star Wars comparison I have in this episode, which is part of why I'm drinking out of a Star Wars mug. A nod to Star Wars, yeah. So I thought that was very cool, and just like ominous and terrifying too. Like, whoa, that dragon is so big. Like, you've seen Vhagar, but like we haven't really seen Vhagar up close with other dragons next to her. And that was like, wow, goodness. In the clouds and everything. So cool. Shay, what about you?
I really liked it when Damon was singing his lullaby to Vermithor, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I'm a little curious what's up with him doing that with another dragon. He's cheating on Caraxes there. But we'll talk about that more later. But I liked the lullaby a whole lot, and the idea that Damon is putting the work in, I guess.
And folks, let me tell you, we've got the lyrics to that song that Damon sang to Vermithor in this episode. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Sean,
are you going to sing it for us?
I don't quite have the melody down.
Melody down.
Nor do I speak High Valyrian. We've got the English translation, I should say, not the Valyrian. Sean, what about you? What's your pick here?
It might be low-hanging fruit, but I picked the same scene that you picked with the... part of why I appreciated it was because you kind of knew it was going to happen, right? When Jace is flying or Luke is flying away and he's kind of anxious and looking around, Aemond's not just going to let him go. And despite knowing it's going to happen, it was still like, when it did happen, it was still like a good moment.
Yeah.
And also I think it was really good to demonstrate the difference in their size and how much difference it makes to have the bigger dragon. Rhaenyra tried to point that out to Damon. It's like, we got 12 and they only have 3. She's like, yeah, but they have the big ones. So.
Like, look at that one huge one. That's like, we've got 2 TIE fighters. They've got a Star Destroyer. Hey, Star Wars coming in again for you. So that's a good call, Sean. We'll have more to say about that as well. JC says, the book implies an exchange of dragonfire. Did you expect more of a fight? I had forgotten about the exchange of dragonfire when I was rereading that part to compare the two. There is the mention from like the battlements. People were able to see from a distance. They said there was like shots of fire necessarily. I can maybe explain some of that as maybe there's a mix of lightning and fire, and some of the observers weren't necessarily sure which was which, because given it's a great distance and there's so many clouds. So I can kind of write that off that way. But I didn't expect more of a fight, because I knew it would be just... There's not much of a fight could happen here. I don't see how much it could be much of a contest, but they could have. They could have done more like evasion, they could have drawn it out a little more. But I didn't expect their Arax to be able to put much of a struggle up.
I don't know how much more we'll talk about this later. I have a few more thoughts, but I could hold them.
Yeah, let's unless you have something that you don't think we're going to bring up later, we'll just get to that when in the intended.
I'll
sections.
say. Worth reminding everyone that I'm unsullied. I don't have an expectation from the book, right?
That's
so
true,
I had no idea what or if even this conflict here was going to happen, much less the amount of dragon fire there's quote unquote supposed to be. I was totally fine with this. I thought it was very well balanced and timed and etc.
I like that Arax fought back. Like, that was cool. Like, just from like the dragon, the way their minds work and all that. But yeah, again, we'll talk about more of that later. The mindset of a dragon. Connor Cunningham says, was Luke eaten whole or did he fall? And this proved Viserys right about who controls dragons, not always the writer. Yes, this was a great callback to one of the most important lines from episode 1. The illusion that we control the or the idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. We saw that very clearly here. Both dragons were out of control. Not just the big one, right? Even Arax was like attacking Vhagar. And Luke is like, that's suicide. Don't do that, man. What are you doing? But I think he was eaten because the way it looked like Vhagar grabbed him like right in the center of his body, right where the saddle was.
I think he was partially eaten.
What's that?
I think he was half eaten.
Yeah.
Like, I think Vhagar chomped them both in half and ate some of it, and then the rest of it just fell in that time. I did screenshot it, and I did see like 2 halves of the dragon very viscerally.
Did
anyways.
Luke have a thumbs up there? He's like, I'm okay.
I thought anything he ate was incidental. Like, he chomped them in half, and some of it might have ended up going in his mouth, but he wasn't trying to eat them per se.
There it is. Wow. It is kind of hard to tell what's going on
there. Vhagar is a she, by the way. A she dragon.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I think I knew that. I need to remember it better.
Yeah. And Sora says, my favorite memes out of this episode are of Grandma Vhagar thinking she was back in Dorne. We got him, Visenya. That's funny. Yes, Vhagar did torch a lot of castles in Dorne during the era of the conquest. And yeah, maybe Vhagar is senile. And who was that?
Yep.
Visenya, who was that? Yeah. You messed up big time, Grandma.
That is really good.
One other thought I'm scared I might forget later that I did want to point out, it's especially because we're talking about the idea of controlling the dragons. Luke kind of knew. remember when he went to get on Arax, he's like, all right, listen to me now. Stay focused. Like, he kind of knew that he might not have full control in this moment. This
obey me, serve me. Yeah,
dangerous moment. Yeah, he was like prepping him for this. Yeah.
There's like a dog that's not healing. Like, there's a distraction. Like, dogs continue to be a great analog for comparison here. We're like, have you ever seen like a small person with a big dog, and the dog is like gets excited, and the person is just like barely trying, like they can barely contain this dog. Sometimes it happens with a small dog. Like dogs can be pretty strong, you know. They can really pull you around, or like a horse that I've personally have had a horse not obey me, and it got my face all slashed up. And,
now you have it out for horses.
Yeah, I do. Seriously, I don't like horses. No, I've ridden horses since then, but it did come up once, and like, what are your least favorite animals? And I was like, mosquitoes and horses. People are like, what? Mosquito? Or what did horses ever do?
My favorite animals are cats and horses.
Oh.
Aubrey says, thanks for all the great content this season. Well, thank you, Aubrey, for supporting us, and we're so glad you came here to enjoy it with us. And we will keep stuff going in the off season while season 2 is in the works. Brandolyn Price says, I want that song Damon sings released in high quality so I can have Matt Smith sing me to sleep in Valyrian. His voice was so beautiful, and I need to know what that was about. Any ideas? Brandolyn, you may not have heard when you posted the super chat, but we do have the lyrics to that song later in the episode. So when we get to that scene, we will tell you exactly what is being said. That sounds like a good idea, though. I bet if they sold like alarm clock little things that just had that song, like only like a little dragon skull that you could sit on your nightstand that sings that.
They do the little music boxes that you can have. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Anthony De Palma says, hey, gang, been listening for a few years, but this is my first time watching y'all live. Sean, what's your favorite dragon name? Oh, so glad you could catch us live, Anthony. I've been recognizing your name for years, so I appreciate that you were able to make it live. That's cool. Do you have a favorite dragon name, Sean? You may not know them all yet.
You might need to think about it and come back to this.
Does anything come to mind off the top of your head, like a preliminary favorite? Maybe you can put it under the microscope for later.
Or a least favorite dragon name.
It's probably something I made up accidentally, combining two names. Like, I think like Cyraxes or something.
Funny you say that, because George R. Martin's favorite dragon movie is what is it? The Dragon...
Rain of Fire?
No, it's the one from the 80s. The Dragon...
Dragonheart?
Dragonheart. Is that Dragonheart? Yeah, well, the dragon is called Verminax Supreme, Vermithrax Supreme, or something like that. And so Vermax and Vermithor are both like half that name, each half of that name, like the Vermax. So it is two names combined in that case, just like you said, except it's the other way around. It's one name split into two. So yes, apparently that's where that came from. Madeline R says, just wanted to thank you and all the other content creators who watched the episodes early, leaked or legit, and still waited until after the episode officially aired to post anything. Well, thank you, Madeline. Yeah, this is a community experience. Like Ashay and I mentioned, the few times we did watch the episode early, which was when we watched it early, it was Saturday evening. So after our preview stream, it was still frustrating. Like, we wanted to talk about it right away, and we missed that. We're like, I can't talk to anybody. I mean, we could talk to each other, which was cool, but we wanted to like immediately, can't go on Twitter. You can't, just like watching it early just immediately isolates you from the community for a day or two or however long. So yeah. So we were motivated to do that. It wasn't just... By
the way, on the subject of favorite dragon names, I'll say I think my favorite canon dragon names are probably Moondancer and Dreamfire.
Nice.
Just I'll give an answer at least.
Do I have to pick one from the Martin's world?
No.
Can I pick something from like Magic the Gathering or something like that?
Yeah.
Still thinking.
Okay.
Okay, cool. But okay, well, we'll get back to you at the end of the episode.
So themes and patterns. Let's list off some of the things we noticed in that regard. As I already said, it's the most cinematic episode, at least in my opinion. There's a lot of lack of preparation, despite warnings coming to bite people, quite literally in Luke's case. It's too late to back down. Things have come to a head, and it's too late to back out of it, like in the case of Corlys, who's like, okay, we're done with ambition. She's like, actually, it's too late for that. A recurring pattern in the episode is they're talking at council and something comes to interrupt them, whether it's a new person coming or a message or an embassy or the sea snake or the one time outside when they're having the funeral, and it turns into a coronation. Miscommunications, errors in judgment have been a theme all throughout the season. They have led to a lot of the biggest tragedies. That's certainly on display here in more than one place, but particularly at the end. Of course, we cited the seminal line from Viserys, the idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. That could be itself a theme of this episode, but dragon lore in general and exploring the bond, as I said, is a big part of this. There's a lot of nods to things that were set up early in the season. There's a bunch of callbacks to episodes 1 through 4, as well as a bunch of nods to Game of Thrones, the original show. And that, I mentioned Star Wars, but these are a little more relevant, the Game of Thrones references. And filling big shoes, like owning up to someone else's legend, owning up to someone's place. Like it happens in the first scene with Luke saying he's not fit to succeed the Sea Snake, given he gets sick before the ship has even left harbor. So yeah, something like half the episodes take place in the room of the painted table, and the first scene does, so we'll start there as well. I thought this was maybe a little subtle to have Luke being the only person in the room, because that's Westeros, right? He's kind of above the world. He's looking down on the continent, kind of like he's going to do at the end, right before he dies. He's touching Driftmark with his hand. It's kind of a sign of, I don't know, he's wary or uncertain. Isn't that usually what the symbolism between like touching something gently like that means, Sean, in like a movie? It's kind of what we're supposed to be communicated to, I think.
Yeah, maybe uncertain. Yeah.
I mean, then he
It's
straight
on
up
his
says
mind.
it.
Yeah, you're right. He straight up says it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's not really that subtle when he just explains himself a minute later. So the setup is that he can't possibly follow Corlys. This has been set up already, in prior episodes. They're expecting him to die. But of course, it's a switcheroo. Luke's the one who ends up dying, and the Sea Snake ends up recovering. So big switcheroo there. And I thought this was a little subtle thing too. Rhaenyra comes in the room. She's like, "There you are." She's like, she's been looking for Luke, which is also kind of how the episode ends. Vhagar, I kind of imagine Vhagar going, "There you are," and then humph. Yikes! We're trying to make light of this tragic child's death here. Luke also expresses the whole big shoes to fill. Not only am I not good enough to fill the Sea Snake's shoes. Snakes don't have feet. That's where you're off, Luke. No shoes to fill at all. But the moment between him and his mom, where she's like, "I'm not like you, Mom. I'm not so perfect." It's like you showrunners with all this tender moments before crushing our hearts. That's what they do to us there.
Yeah, I really appreciated him referring to Rhaenyra as perfect right there, because we've seen a whole season of Rhaenyra not being perfect, but then you are able to put yourself in the eyes of this child, this baby who just he has no idea about Rhaenyra's past in life and all these things that we've seen, and it really helped put me into Luke's mindset right there.
That's a great point. And it suggests something I wanted to do in the future with these characters. Some of the stuff we want to do in the off season is to follow the lives of certain characters and see what they see. Look at it through their eyes. Because you're right, the perspectives are hard to keep track of. What we see Rhaenyra is not how Luke sees Rhaenyra. So we have to kind of parse it and see, okay, so this is what this is what his life would be like as best as we can tell, from given what stimulus and what events he was witness to. What do you think, Sean?
Well, when I was going to say, it's also worth noting that Rhaenyra isn't necessarily what she sees herself as, or
okay.
No one is.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to that point, maybe she said something to the effect of, I had to earn my inheritance. And I remember thinking, did you earn your inheritance? I don't know. I mean, one, does anyone in general, but also there's a lot of proactive things she could have done that she didn't do.
Yeah.
But maybe she isn't necessarily going to exactly say that to her son in this moment. She wants him to feel like he needs to earn it. There's a lot of ways to look at that.
Another thing she said that kind of rings oof, is it really though, Rhaenyra? She said, "I'll help you prepare for your duties and for what life is going to bring to you, just as I was prepared." It's which is, you weren't very well prepared. They didn't prepare you very well, so that is kind of true. You sent this boy out. He probably wasn't ready for this. And I'm not saying ready to encounter Vhagar, because no one's ready for that. I mean ready, he was scared the whole time, even before realized Vhagar was there. He was just scared to be a diplomat. Like, the whole thing was intimidating for him. I don't know that he was fully ready for it. And as we'll get to later, there's some things he could have done that if he wasn't so intimidated, it might have gone a little differently. It might have actually gone decently well.
Yeah, and
talk about talk about trial by fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later too. But it's like Rhaenyra had other options available to her for this.
Yeah, that's true. We will.
It's
we will
it's
point
not
that
like
out.
this was her only option was to send to send Luke.
Yeah.
She may not have properly calculated how dangerous it was, but it may have been a good way to put trust in him and give him confidence. I'm not necessarily saying it was her best option, but I think it was a good.
I don't agree with people who say it was a terrible idea, but I think there were flaws with the idea. Yeah, I think some people think it was just like stupid, but I'm like, I wouldn't go that far.
Also, it's hard to not be results oriented.
Yes.
What if Aemond hadn't been there?
Yeah.
With,
exactly.
with,
or if he had been there and left already.
Vhagar, how differently would it have gone?
Yeah.
You know,
that part's bad luck.
If he not purely bad luck, because they did get the initiative, right?
Yes.
The Greens did.
I agree.
Have
Like,
initiative.
partly
They
it
knew
seems
first.
pretty obvious that there would be an envoy from the Greens there as well. Again, Rhaenyra couldn't have anticipated it would end in death. Like that, I don't blame her for that. But I think she could have anticipated that there might be another counter offer.
They might have sent dragons too.
And sent a dragon too. Like,
that.
there's a lot of things she could have anticipated and prepared Luke for.
Because they did sit around the painted table thinking about, all right, what are our resources? What do we have? What are things we can do? Send these ravens out. Did anyone stop for a minute and think, what has Otto done already?
No, they had.
Who would they go message? You know, they weren't putting themselves in their enemy's
And this
shoes.
isn't criticizing the writing. This is, I think, a reflection of how unused to war, planning for war, all these people are. None of them have any experience at war. Daemon's war was in the Stepstones, so he has some experience in war. The Sea Snake has some experience in war, but it's a very different type of war. And like, it's basically fighting against people that they don't care about versus the people who they intend to make their subjects, which is very, very different.
And even in that war where they have ostensibly a pretty clear advantage, they had at least 2 dragons against just some mercenary sailors. You know what I mean? It wasn't like some massive trained army or something. And they still struggled to win that war, right?
Yeah.
They probably didn't plan it very well. They were at odds with each other about what the plan
Master
should be.
Complaints was saying Daemon's leadership wasn't good, which I don't know if he knows what good leadership looks like, but given what we've seen from Daemon, I'm like, I can believe his leadership was bad. I can believe he was hot-headed and not like made decisions based on pride rather than, you know, smart decisions, strategy or whatever.
But yeah, I do look at like there's the scene where Rhaenyra assigns the tasks, right? And she says, okay, Jace, you're going to do this, and Luke, you're going to do this. And in that scene, also around in the room are Baela and Rhaena, who Baela's a dragon rider as well, and Rhaenys, who's also a dragon rider, right? And so in my head, I just don't see why you would send, like, I get that sending Luke as a prince, like, that is an honorable, like that is showing respect to Lord Boros, right? Like, so I get why she would send Luke. I just feel like you just like send Rhaenys with Luke or send Baela with Luke, and then like you don't send your like 13, 14-year-old son. Oh, I don't know. And it's like stormy. I didn't feel like I hated this decision from Rhaenyra as much when I read the book, but when I saw the scene and I saw the people in front of her and the options she had, it just seemed so obvious to me that she messed up.
Yeah, Rhaenys is a much better choice. That's what we were going to say. Rhaenys is a better choice to send her because she's the one that's actually a Baratheon. They're taking this denial of Luke's true parentage a little too far and seeing it from their own eyes, whereas like Boros Baratheon isn't going to look at Luke as his kin. He's going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to call him a bastard, but we both know he's not really my kin. But Rhaenys is. And she's obviously not intimidated. Like, she's going to be able to speak to him and not be afraid of him, you know.
Another extra little bit of, I don't know, frustration or irony or whatever, that she even said, like, Lord Baratheon would be happy to welcome a prince and his dragon.
He was.
Yeah,
he was.
would.
Yeah,
he
one
was happy
prince.
to.
Yeah.
One dragon.
The bigger one that got there first that agreed to marry his daughter. Yeah. So we'll come back a little more detail on that scene later, but
I had another thought in this scene. It was tied into something else I said too about like how we see ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe like the idea of like how we see them, how they are, how they might even see themselves. Daemon in this scene when they find out Viserys is dead, he immediately suspects foul play.
Yeah.
Some chicanery of some sort, right? He's like,
well, he has been suspecting it even before this episode.
Yeah,
this is just rehashing that, yeah.
And I think that at least partly has to do with a human tendency is to project how we are onto other people. If you're someone who's dishonest, you're more suspicious of people lying to you. If you're someone who's honest, you're more aghast when you find out someone lied to me. You know, Daemon would do something like that. And so he assumes that must be what someone else
suspects
did,
murders because he's a murderer. I mean, yeah, you're totally right. I totally 100% agree with that. Murderers expect other people to be murderers. So, yeah, I 100% agree with that. So that's part of, and that really kicks off his mood for the whole episode. He starts off angry. Yes, he's sad that his brother's dead, but it's a matter of revenge and pride as well. There's not just that. Whereas Rhaenyra, as we've said, is more stoic about the whole thing and a little more restrained. A lot more restrained, really. And then Damon just, throughout the episode, he's like a caged animal. He wants to get out. He's like, look, you married me to be your sword, to be your dragon. Unleash me now. This is why you literally told me I can't fight the Greens alone. You know, I need you. He's like, okay, well, here I am. It's happening. Unleash me already. So I kind of, from that perspective, I kind of understand his rage, but not his need to override strategy and thinking first. You know, like, you still, Rhaenyra's right. It's like, well, we don't even know who's on our team yet. Like, like, what do you mean attack now? Let's a little slower. Come on, just a little slower. So anyway. Devorlin Blackwood says, thank you for being consistently excellent for years. I know the canons are different, but now I can't wait until we Westorians Valar reread as Fire and Blood. Yeah, that's definitely on the horizon as well. That's going to be a lot of fun to play with the different versions and keeping them straight and reimagining certain things with certain of the show characters, like their imagery and some of these ideas that fits in pretty well. It might be a little bit more fun of a process, too, because in this scenario, for this book, it's not an exact thing, right? It's like different perspectives of different people we can't rely on. So it won't be quite as much the show got it wrong. It's more like the show showed us another way to look at it, right? Yeah, I do like, it is different that way. It's a very unique origin behind it all. Yeah, most adaptations are more like A Song of Ice and Fire, and they come from a novel, fiction novel or series of novels rather than a fictional world book. Even the Rings of Power, which is kind of in that regard, is based on things that aren't in the main books a lot. So that's maybe the closest comparison, and even that's a lot different. Stark Type says, thoughts on the punctuation of Cregan Stark. Pronunciation of Cregan Stark in this episode. And who is he dream casting for Cregan Stark? I'll say it both ways. Yeah, so we've always said Cregan, and they said Cregan. So, oh well, and it's funny because there's some pronunciations where I'm like, I'll always say Corlys, not Corlys, because I feel like I don't want to say anus, so I'll say anus, whatever. Like it comes from that for me, but I don't have any reason to say Cregan versus Cregan, so I think I'm going to try to move my pronunciation over to Cregan if I can. So that's one that got me, but I abide by what George has said, which is that there are no correct pronunciations. Say it how you want. Yeah, as long as people know who you're talking about. Like, don't pronounce Cregan driveway. That's confusing. So yeah, Dreamcasting. Do you have anyone have an idea here? I don't have. I've thought about this. I'm regularly someone who draws blanks when someone asks me to cast a character. I'm like, oh. I'm regularly someone who wants an unknown. This is Cregan should be about 21 to 25. He should be in his early 20s. There's probably the most likely actor would be someone that I know from very little things. It would be my ideal choice. Point that out. That was a nice one-liner. She's like, well, he's closer to your age than mine. So. Yeah. So he's like, you guys, when fan casting him, do not cast a 40-year-old man. It is a frequent issue when people fan cast. Is they're like, Ewan Mitchell is going to be Cregan Stark and Aemond Targaryen. Be interesting. I don't have an idea. Like, you just now said he's 21, but I didn't know that even. So it's hard for me to think who it should be. How old is this guy? But knowing he's 21, I would like to see this is almost the opposite of what you're saying, Shea, but
what's his name? He's like the hottest young actor right now.
Chalamet?
He's been in like 30 movies already.
Timothy Chalamet?
Timothy Chalamet. I'd like to see a bulked out Timothy Chalamet. That's what I want.
Honest actor.
This conversation was what, like the most I was like, I'm like, Timothy Chalamet? We have a mind meld going, the Dragon Bond.
Yeah.
And we've got that going here.
You know Sean's type is Kristen Cole, so you're like, what's the most Kristen Cole-esque young actor today? It's Fabian and
It's true,
Timothy.
they are. We need
They're
a movie
like
where those two
dark-haired,
are
slight
a
men.
family. Yeah, she
We all
cast.
know Sean's type now. No, I think Sean meant hottest, like hottest as in he's very popular right
Yeah.
now, to be clear, but
He meant both.
I meant both. Yes.
See, mine. Watch out, Fabian Frankel's going to turn out to be cast in Dune too. And we're like, is he an Atreides? Some hidden Atreides cousin. Okay, David Monroe says, I love the twist of the Targaryens not having complete control of the dragons. Didn't see that coming. Had happy tears at the end of the episode. Yes, same here. It's a great twist. I love it so much more than the idea of Aemond just cackling to himself, flying off, which is kind of the idea you get from the book from Fire and Blood, but which is a history book. So like the Maesters don't know. No one was there. It's a perfect example of no one was there. There are people maybe from a distance who could barely see that, from the castle walls. That's what Fire and Blood implies. But no one knows is in Aemon's head. And Aemond might. There's already theories out there that Aemon's going to say he did it on purpose because of that old adage, it's better to look evil than incompetent. Right? And that would be what gets into the history books. That if he says he did it on purpose, they would take him at his word. Like, why would they doubt that? So, yeah, I love it too. It adds so much more both to his character, to dragon lore in general, to what we can't. It's like, wow, so much more is unpredictable that we in the future. Like so many, what other dragon is going to just go off script or...
It also fits what's been set up so far, too, at least in the show.
Yeah.
Right? Viserys saying, like, hey, we shouldn't have done this. It's an illusion. We control them. Another funny tweet I saw, which I know to get credit for this, but it was, it was like a series of images of Dany burning King's Landing. And it's like, Dany was innocent.
Yeah.
It's like
Drogon, no!
Like, Drogon, no!
That's why her face was all twisted. She's like, I can't get this dragon to stop. He just won't stop. He stopped obeying me. Yeah, the Dany stands are all over that one. They're like, see, she's innocent. David I read that one already. So we'll talk about Visenya now. I don't think they said the name, but in the book, that little child that Rhaenyra loses here is named Visenya, and that was set up in episode 1 when she had already nicknamed the unborn child. She's like, oh, it's going to be a girl named Visenya. And then remember Emma and Viserys are like, ooh, we've already got a Visenya in our family. And they're talking about Damon. But, which is interesting because Visenya's dragon was Vhagar. It's already come up this episode that we've talked about. And so it's kind of a neat little circle there. Now, the news of the coronation and her father's death sends her into early labor. But this child was not right to begin with. By the time the baby comes out, you get to look at it. You can't really exactly tell. Like, it's covered in blood. But, like, she's missing a leg. I'm not sure she had arms. Some people think there were scales. It's hard to tell. The head was not shaped right, like a normal human head. Yeah.
This has got to be something coming from the books, I assume.
Well, all the things I'm describing?
Yeah, I mean, I believe these things were in the scene. I didn't take note of it.
Yeah.
To me, I didn't notice
Yeah,
anything
they are in the book.
out of that. I mean, maybe I was half like turning away from it, to be fair.
You're right. They are in the book, and so we were kind of looking for it. But not exactly like that. Like in the book, it doesn't describe the missing leg, for example. But I was just like, whoa, there's only one leg there. Some people said there were nubs of wings they could see, which is described in the book. Like there's little dragon stub wings. It's supposed to be like Rhaego, which they didn't show Rhaego in the show. In season 1 of Game of Thrones, by the way, here's one of our many callbacks to season 1 of Game of Thrones in general. Think about that. Like in the book description of Rhaego, it was like a whole grave worms and wings and demon qualities and dragon qualities. So yeah, supernatural. This is not a standard, normal set of deformities that a child can have. This is not a standard stillbirth. There's magic in play here. I think.
For what it's worth,
I wonder if they wanted
in the show version, I didn't see it. To me, it looked like it was a premature stillbirth. I didn't see what people were seeing there.
Well, you see what I'm saying. Like the child was missing. Like you not see the
that's
dragon
like
stuff.
Pretty much, to me, that's not really the dragon. I don't see the dragon stuff. Is my point.
Okay.
I don't see the dragon stuff. Like it's in the book, so I get why people would be primed to see it, but I don't.
I thought it was a little, I don't know what word I want to use, grotesque, maybe even distasteful to be showing this bloody deformed baby so much. I feel like a lot of people might be kind of disturbed by this, and so maybe for the sake of people wanting to see deformities because they're expecting it from the book, they drew it out longer than what might have seemed normal or appropriate to other people. Yeah. I don't know.
They certainly were giving the dragon vibes, though, whether you see it in the fetus or in the child or not, because of the Cyrax flashes, like when they
were cutting back and forth.
Yeah, so there's definitely the draconic imagery, like there's definitely dragon vibes all over the scene, whether they were intending to show that in the child or not. So the vibes are there one way or the other, even if we can't get into specifics. So that's really interesting. So she's kind of like, it's also kind of like, I got the vibe of her not letting anyone near her. It was like she's a dragon in that moment too. She didn't want human touch because in that moment she was a dragon. Also, just goodness, that is a tough woman. She didn't, like, that's the only time she sits down, like the whole episode, except when she's in the saddle. Like in one day, she's like, my father dies, I lose a kid, it's a miscarriage, I bury the child, I have the child's funeral, I get crowned, and like she never sits down except when she's cradling the child on the floor there. Very tough woman, and she doesn't break until the end when it's just too much. It's finally the grief is overwhelming, but we'll get to that. So at the beach, meanwhile, she's like, instead of calling for help, she's like, send my sons in here. Jace and Luke are outside practicing. We get another callback or a throwback to episode 6. Where Jace is being really aggressive training with Luke. And the Kingsguard steps in and is like, hey, maybe that's a little too aggressive. It's very similar to the way Kristen Cole goaded their real father into stepping in when they were training between the two sets of boys. Very similar vibes there. So even with... Yeah, I definitely took note of that too. I wondered where they were going with that. And then Luke ends up dying, but I wondered if there was going to end up being some conflict between those brothers, if Jace was going to go too far in some other way. Maybe it's not too late for that now. Just somewhere else, yeah. Well, shout out to Joe Magician. I'm wearing a Joe Magician shirt. I was on his episode last night, the post-show recap stuff, and he suggested maybe Jace is become more aggressive at training because of how much he was shown up by Aemond in that scene when he punched Aemond, and Aemond's like, barely felt that, and then just shoves him down with one hand and knocks him off his feet. He was like, whoa, you really, that dude just physically dominated you. So he might be like, playing hard to try to catch up.
Remember, Kristen Cole tried to teach that lesson too.
Yeah,
like he encouraged Aegon, I think at the time.
In this exact scene that I was referring to, yeah.
Yeah, Aegon, got Jace down, and then Kristen pushed him to keep going. Don't let him up. You know, and now it seemed like Jace is doing the same thing to Luke there.
Yeah.
And Kristen was kind of doing it as this tough. I mean, he had multiple motivations going on there. I don't want to justify him too much, but he was at least partly trying to make the point, like, look, your enemy's not necessarily going to be fair or nice to you, and when it really comes to battle. And I think that Jace saw that.
Yeah.
Right. Jace saw that with Aemond, and so now maybe Jace, in the same way Kristen wanted to teach it, when he wants to teach it to his younger brother, it's a pretty crappy thing to have to want to teach someone, but as part of war or combat or these times or whatever.
And there's just another sign that Luke just isn't cut out for it. Like, he's apologizing. He's not like fighting back. He's like apologizing to his brother for not being good enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's like, sorry, I'm sorry. And it's like, that's not the warrior mindset that Jace is trying to impart to you. Because he's not teaching it very well. But I just don't think Luke was cut out for it. That's the other thing. This is not
Luke's not a warrior or a sailor or what is he? He's a flyer.
Sure. He didn't have time to. He never
didn't have
had
time to find that out.
Find himself.
No.
He's a boy.
Yeah.
Is what he
is.
He's
an eye gouger.
Yeah.
He's an eye gouger. He never got to. His true calling was to cut out more eyes. Like, set up a shop on the street of Silk. Eye gougings. Eye gougings. Anyone need to know? Yeah. So they get Rhaenys shows up and brings them in, and they go to talk to their mother, and she tells them what's happened, and Luke reacts like, Viserys, because he's all like, my granddad's gonna die any minute now, and it's his other granddad that dies. There's another thing, it's like hard to keep track of, like, yes, he was thinking of his granddad, the sea snake, but now he finds out his granddad, the king, has died instead. So I was like, oh, wow, now I'm about to lose both my granddads because he's still not thinking the sea snake is going to recover. That hasn't happened yet in this episode. And she stops Jace and is like, make sure you conduct yourself as the heir from now on. You're the heir to the throne. You have to act like it, And he's like, yes, mother, very seriously.
By the way, he had another granddad also die a little while ago, right? Lionel, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
That was technically his granddad.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, that was like 8 years ago.
I'm assuming Lionel Strong's wife was like long dead at that point. Just she's never came up because otherwise he has an alive grandma.
It didn't. Yeah, it never did come up in the book. He marries like 3 times, and I don't know what happens with. I think his third wife may have been dead too by the time the book. Sorry, I forget though.
Morbid thought, but whatever wife he may have had probably got burned up in Harrenhal.
Maybe. We could hope that since the castle is so large, she was elsewhere, but that's one of the good times, one of the times you hope that the couple doesn't share a room. This would be a good thing this time. Damon, let's talk about him because they ask where he is. Jace and Luke are like, where's Damon? And Rhaenyra is yelling for him. He's not coming. He's inexorable still. His rage is very fresh at this point. And she says he's gone to madness. So she kind of recognizes that he's not quite right. She says that to Jace and Luke. She's like, he's gone to madness. And he's kind of...
Oh, sorry. I was thinking of a different moment when someone was asking about... Yeah, sorry. I'm getting things messed up. Yeah.
The one thing he said...
Because later someone asked where's Damon. They're like having a meeting.
When he's off with the dragon.
Other responsibilities took him away or whatever. I wonder if that moment, if Rhaenyra actually knew where he was or not.
She might not have.
I guess we'll get to that later. But
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
But no, I thought it was super interesting that Rhaenyra was so blunt with both Jace and Luke about Damon in that moment. Like, obviously, she's in the middle of giving birth, and so, all delicacies are kind of out the window right there. But still, that's like an extreme... Like, if you think about a mother telling her children that their stepfather has gone to madness, and the thing she said about Damon is it's pretty real.
Yeah, she wasn't exaggerating either. You're right, it was very blunt. But I think she partly was preparing Jace because Jace goes in and immediately tries to start telling Damon, "Hey, stop! My mom said not to do that," and that's of course what leads to the Kingsguard scene outside. One thing before that, though, Damon says, okay, if the Greens are going to make any moves this early, it's going to be a stealth attack. He's right. They were going to send an assassination party led by Harold Westerling to do exactly that. It's ironic that the person he accuses of killing his brother is the person most responsible for stopping that attack, Alicent. Of course, Harold Westerling just wasn't going to do it, so there's that too. He gets a lot of credit, and it kind of shows that Otto's not quite as dangerous as Damon thinks of him, because it's like Otto's whole plan was to order this Kingsguard Lord Commander to do that. Like, he was never going to do that. It was a bad idea to rely on that. So
he may have done it in some other way. Like, just because Harold Westerling didn't do it doesn't mean Otto didn't still have that plan.
Which is why Alicent still made the move to get out in front of it. You're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah. Otto might still make that plan, right?
He might. Yeah.
Like, once it happens, then what is Alicent?
Well, now they're on guard. It's kind of hard to assassinate them now. Yeah. But you're right. Well, not that there aren't ways, but it's not like he can't do the catch them unawares part. That was what he was hoping for. Now that's just off the table.
Yeah.
Jace and Damon, so they have their little mini power struggle. Damon's orders basically proceed anyway. He's like, "Go ahead and send those ravens." Like, as Jace is like, "Don't," and then Damon's like, and Lord Celticar's like, "All right, I'll send the ravens." And that's basically what's demonstrated in that moment. It's like, I'm going to listen to the person who's a lot more threatening. Technically, Jace has the authority here, but Damon is I'm going to listen to Damon.
Especially Damon in this moment might literally pull his sword out and chop my head off.
Exactly, and that's the lesson Damon's like, and this is why they're listening to me, because they're afraid I'm going to cut their head off. And notice how he has his sword drawn this whole time. It's not out of its scabbard, I don't think, but this is an example. He pretty much has Dark Sister in hand like the whole episode. It's almost never sheathed, and one of the few times it is sheathed, he draws it. He's like to threaten Otto.
Yeah.
So
I mean, he is every sign of a tyrant.
Yeah. Yeah. He's acting like what Otto said he would be like, even though Otto is also kind of acting that way himself. So there, and Aegon has the personality of someone that will behave that way. The guy they just put into king. Maybe. We'll see about that.
Like if Otto had a wish, if he had Melisandre or something, if he could just suddenly become a capable warrior, he might just go and challenge Damon to a sword fight or chop off someone's head in the middle of quarters. He might have been the one to kill Beesbury in the council room or whatever.
Yeah. All these second sons. No one should have more than one son in Westeros. It's the second son's called Damon's second son. Otto's second son. Aemond second son. Well, not really. Actually, Corlys had an older brother. I think Corlys and Damon had an older brother. He was effectively the second son in terms of...
Corlys is a problem too, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true. So Damon leads Jace outside. Look, here's a real lesson in loyalty. Really, it was a lesson in fear. But fear is a way to acquire loyalty. I wouldn't say inspire. It's the wrong phrasing. But it's a bit heavy-handed. Maybe a bit is... too mild. It's heavy-handed, and we've seen other leadership styles work, but so it's not the only way to lead what Damon's doing here. But Damon's he doesn't trust people because he's a murderer, so he needs to scare them into submission because he won't trust them any other way, and he still doesn't probably trust them.
Yeah, like even what he said was like, "Let me show you what loyalty means."
Wow.
Like, how is this what loyalty means?
That's intimidation.
It was stupid to me. I was like, I don't get that he really taught Jace much of any lesson there at all. It seems like a huge waste of their time. Like, it seems like the sort of thing that you do that to someone and they say, "Yeah, I swear," and then they're like, "Actually, I don't. I'm gonna leave now." Like, it seems like it would drive the Kingsguard away, not solidify them as swearing. I don't know. It just seemed like the wrong strategy to me.
I totally agree. Totally wrong strategy.
Even if it actually worked to get their loyalty, it's still not the only way to get the loyalty. A.
Mm-hmm.
B. Are you sure you didn't have their loyalty already?
Yeah.
C. If you did, you might have degraded it a little bit just now. D. What lesson are you teaching? I could go on and on. Like, anyway.
Okay, so let's
every scene with Damon, I was like, let me make a list of what's wrong with this now.
Contrast two examples that worked that were done well, but similarly. Robb Stark, with Grey Wind at his side, kind of looking intimidating, maybe growling a little, while he's commanding his vassals, telling them like, "Hey, I'm in charge now," blah blah. But he's not threatening to torture them. He's not telling. He's just like, it's all implication. It's the iron gauntlet versus the silk glove, and he's like, he reminds them that the gauntlet is there, but he's presenting the glove. Damon is just straight gauntlet here. He's like, "I'm in your face. I will kill you if you if you don't obey." Yeah, there's no subtlety, no winning them over. His great grandfather Jaehaerys did the same thing. He flew to say Storm's End and some other places with just Vermithor and was like, "Hey, I'm here by myself. I don't need to bring my retinue." They get the message. They see the huge dragon. They're like, "I know there's more where that came from."
This is a little bit of a, we're swirling a lot of topics, but it's almost like when Tywin tells, anyone who needs to tell people they're the king isn't really the king. Like, if Damon feels a need that he has to use the threat of his dragon to get someone's loyalty, that means you don't have their loyalty.
Yes, yeah. Totally agree. Yeah, you're right. Like, and the way Jaehaerys is doing, he's braver. He's like, "Look, I trust you. I'm turning my back to you. B, I'm trusting that you're not stupid enough to turn on me when I have a dragon right here." Like, I don't need to spell this out for you. I don't need to insult your intelligence by explaining all this to you. Like, look, I'm in charge. Be cool, and everything's gonna be cool. Rather than be cool, or I will torture you to death. It's just
another wrinkle in this. It maybe doesn't really make a difference, but this all presumes that. And I don't know. The thing is that Damon and pretty much everyone there, because they don't have full information, they're assuming that these are all traitors and liars and usurpers or whatever. But as far as Alicent, as far as maybe even Westerling, definitely Kristen Cole or Aemond, all those people back in King's Landing, they don't think they're traitors. They don't. If those other Kingsguard had been a witness to what happened, they might have been more torn. Right. And maybe Damon would have to threaten them into loyalty. But that's part of why I think it's extra weird for him to press this, because they don't have any reason to not be loyal anyway. It's as far as it seems to them on Dragonstone that they are traitors. But the fact that they aren't necessarily really traitors adds to the loyalty dilemma later on if they find out the truth. They're like, oh, we were loyal because we thought A and we're threatened B, but now we know this truth and don't like being threatened. It sets them up even more so if they, maybe they don't get that information. Maybe they're too deep to change at that point. Who knows? But
yeah, he's not.
Anyway, we talked a lot about this.
He's not leading. He's not raising morale. He's not doing the things that leaders do. At no point in the season has he shown leadership qualities. He's shown like I'm above you qualities. He's shown pride, arrogance. He knows how to, dominate, but he doesn't know how to lead.
And I'll attempt to be fair. There have been moments when he has been sympathetic, like when he helped Viserys pick up his crown, or he was understanding of Rhaenyra when Emma had died, or whatever. But none of those things justify all the murders he's committed. Yep. None of those things make him a good leader, et cetera, et cetera.
So let's move on to the funeral and the coronation. First, after she loses the baby, she continues to do all this herself, right? She wraps the child herself. The Silent Sisters are there, but they're mostly just observing, handing her things. I don't know. They don't seem to be mostly just in a support role there. Meanwhile, Damon's down at the beach, still holding Dark Sister, but he is grieving, but it's still like manifesting his anger. And I feel like if you could get really close, I imagine like he's gripping the sword like tighter than he normally would, like his knuckles would be going white. So for most of them, it's mounting. There's lots of losses to keep track of. Loss of Viserys, loss of baby Visenya, the usurpation. At this point, Rhaenyra is handling it better. In fact, throughout the whole episode, she handles it better. She's more of a controlled person in general. She's more stoic. But also, Damon believes worse. He believes that they murdered Viserys, where Rhaenyra hasn't really weighed in on that. I think she's maybe open to that. She definitely feels betrayed by Alicent, given how they parted and how, like, we were going to come back and start rebuilding our friendship. And next thing you know, you've crowned your son. So that's a betrayal, even if she doesn't fully understand the circumstances.
Something that Rhaenyra's, I think, thinking about that Daemon isn't. As far as anyone knows or thinks, or well, maybe not as far as, but many people think that Rhaenyra and Daemon murdered Laenor.
Yeah.
Right?
Most people
but she knows it's not true. She knows that's just the story that's being told. So can't that also be the case? Like how, like, Damon, you can't act on this. You can't just assume this thing is true. If everyone assumed that we were murderers, they were already come for us. Yeah. You have to, even if it is true, we can't know, we can't behave as though it is. And Damon is anyway, but she is not, thank goodness.
Yeah. So Eric arrives during the funeral and swears. This is funny. We were like, swears to ward the queen, not toward the queen. We thought it was toward, like in your general direction, but no, it was to ward her against her enemy. You know, warding off things. And he hands the crown to Daemon first. Daemon is overcome. It's a look he hasn't had on his face. It was very meaningful, like he's staring at the Targaryen sigil, which was highlighted, like they've really focused on it, almost like maybe he thought this would be his one day, or it's making him think of his brother and just their life together and a lot of different things. But turns around, crowns her, and kneels. And it's a big change. The mood. It's odd to have a funeral and a coronation combined like that. But Rhaenys still doesn't bow.
You sparked another thought in me, by the way. In fact, I should have brought this. I brought it up earlier. I wish I brought it up when you were talking about like the themes and patterns or whatever. Yeah. I think it's another example of this sort of parallel that happened several times in this episode of what's going on with the Greens and the Blacks, with Alicent, Otto versus Daemon and Rhaenyra. In a lot of ways through this episode, he was sort of ruling through her or over her. Kind of like Otto, like ostensibly, Aegon's going to be the king, but we know really Alicent and or Otto are going to be pulling the strings. Daemon's kind of doing it over and over again. Theoretically, Rhaenyra is the queen, but he was making decisions, ignoring things that she said, pushing his agenda, kind of embarrassing her in front of, even when the whole room was around. Yep. And I had that same thought when he was like looking at that crown. There's part of a little piece of him is like, it should be me. And I think another piece of him kind of resigned to, it'll just be me anyway. I'll just do what I want anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm the power behind the throne. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh shoot, I had one other little thought connected to that and I lost it. It'll come back. We should move on.
The painted table is lit. So we get another moment with the painted table. This is where we get the ceremony for it. Actually, backing up just a little bit, I wanted to compare that last scene to Dany's second to last scene, or final scene in season 1 of Game of Thrones. Her funeral pyre scene, where she's puts Drogo and Mirri Maz Duur to rest. And it wasn't planned as a coronation either. But by the end of it, everyone's kneeling to her as the mother of dragons and as Khaleesi. And it's kicked off as well by the death. Like it was Drogo's death and Viserys' death that kicks it all off, but it turns into something else. And it's very draconic, of course, as well. And it's imagining. So that's pretty cool. Even with the first person to kneel being like her one quote-unquote Kingsguard, Jorah, who she named as her first official Kingsguard. Actually, technically, she named him that. No, she did name before she walked into the fire. Yeah, it was before she walked into the fire. She names them all Blood Riders, and they're like, actually, we can't follow a woman. And she goes into the fire, comes out, and they're like, okay, we can follow a woman. At least this one. Damn. And they all kneel and bow. Yeah, so very similar vibes there. Cool. Well done by the show, calling that back.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
The Kingsguard that are there with Rhaenyra.
By the way, we should be saying Queensguard, y'all.
Good point. Queensguard. You're totally right. Yeah.
But anyways, yes, go on.
One of them is Stefan Laurent.
Laurent Marbrand is the one that looks like a shaved younger Harold Westerling, the bald one. And the one with hair is Stefan Darklin.
Okay.
I had them backwards at first.
Marbrand,
I thought
Darklin.
It was the other way around, but Darklin is the one with hair.
Is there a story or a history to them? Is it worth speaking to their houses or how they got to be Queen's Guards?
No, they were
whatever?
Born at that age. They were sprung, fully formed. They plucked them right off the Queen's Guard tree that morning.
I actually put a few notes in here about that and skipped them, so I'm glad you asked that question. So yes, the Darklins, Stefan Darklin, the Darklins are super, super loyal to the Targaryens. They have a long history of loyalty to the Targaryens. In fact, this isn't established at this point, but by the time of A Song of Ice and Fire, there have been 7 Darklin Kingsguard, which is number 1, like easily the most Kingsguard from one family. I'm not sure what number he would represent, like the 3rd or 4th, but yeah. So they've had a long history of loyalty. So they probably didn't need to worry about him as much. Although both sides are Targaryen, so it's still like, well, yeah. Maybe arguably this side is more Targaryen because both the king consort and queen are Targaryen. But anyway. But now the Greens are too.
But the kids are not. So
yeah, and the Greens are that way too now. With Helena and Aegon are Targaryen. So anyway, so the Marbrands though, the other one, Laurent Marbrand, they're a vassal of Casterly Rock. That's close to the Lannisters. So that one,
I think he looks very much like a Westerlander to me, like a Westerman. They like that. That's just been like a consistent thing that a lot of the Westerlanders had like bald heads and like a
trimmed
beard.
beards.
Yeah,
they
beards,
have like the Northerns have wild
very,
beards and the Westerlands have more like trimmed. That's a good point. I wonder if that's like an intentional thing they've been doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think so.
You're right about that. So that one maybe there would be a worry that since the Lannisters are likely to side with the Greens, that maybe this guy's loyalty is perhaps in question. But anyway,
but how does he even know that, right?
Yeah, and the Cargill, Eric and Arik are Cargills. That's a Crownlands house, so the Darklands are also a Crownlands house, which means they're very close to King's Landing. So it's like, well, they're gonna be loyal, but to which side? Because it's Targaryen. So in this case, well, one of each. All right, yeah.
Yeah, I would not have trusted. Like, I get why they do trust Eric right there in that moment, but for me, I would be very paranoid in this situation about this person being here to kill me. Like, I know that, like, you're like, okay, let's trust their honor and they're not this despicable, but legit, I would be very paranoid as Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
Just imagine if he had coated that crown with some sort of poison. Like, here, Damon, give this to Rhaenyra.
I got them both. It's like, why are you wearing gloves, Kingsguard? Like, oh, my hands are cold, man. So yeah, let's go to the painted table. Very, very awesome setup here. Amazing music, the candles. Aegon planned his conquest in front of this table. Dany and Stannis. It has moved rooms though. In Game of Thrones original show, it was in the room where you could see out the window. But it's a table, so I'm it's big, but doesn't mean it can't be moved.
Yeah, they talked in the behind the scenes about how they moved the painted table because they just really needed more room to film.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're like, let's put it in a much larger space, which
cool.
makes sense. I like it.
So she comes in. It's very, proper, observing some ceremony here and protocol. though it hasn't all been established because she's a new queen. Like, you could see the little slight awkwardness when the guards start to follow her, and she's like, hold up there. We're like, we gotta work all these little bits of protocol out here. It hasn't quite been done yet. It looks like Rhaena is the cupbearer, the way she hands her a cup of wine there.
Yeah, that is the impression that I got as well, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. It's a fitting role. It is a typical.
That's the role that Rhaenyra had for her father, was cupbearer for a while. So yeah, I appreciate
it's
that.
often given to a
That
younger
said,
noble.
though,
yeah,
she handed her that cup, but then was welcomed to the table. She's like, okay, now come on. And she walked up to the table along with her sister, and Rhaenys took note of that also.
Yeah.
And
Good
I think
catch.
that was something we talked about in the episode about Viserys, like things he should have, could have done, or other people should have, could have done leading up to this. And that was when I thought I forgot to mention, but they should have had her not just in the room serving wine. She should have really been part of the council. Like, she'd even demonstrated some good knowledge, with when the Stepstones first came up and she was quieted down. They should have had her speak up more often on purpose, even if they ignore what she says. At least let her feel accepted. Maybe she will have a good idea on and on. And I think that's what we're supposed to see here, is that these girls are accepted. They are a part of this council. They're not just in the room. They're not just serving wine.
They haven't started speaking up yet, but
go to the table and they took part.
That makes sense.
It should have been assigned a
Rhaenys to see this
task.
is
I
good.
still think that was a mess up, but
Yeah.
It might be there,
Like,
just
I
to
can't
make sure they
wait,
don't
you
lose
know.
the sea snakes.
I could get
keep
there.
them safe.
Maybe I don't want to risk Bela.
If you lose
or
Bela, you
keep
lose
a dragon
the
rider
connection
at
to Jace.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You might lose Rhaenys and Corlys also. Then
Yeah.
they're like, never mind.
Yeah,
That's
you're
not-
right.
yeah.
You're right. There is a certain
There's
element
political
where
element to it. Yeah.
where there's we need to keep Bela safe for that reason. I don't know. Anyways,
that does make sense to me. I don't know that that's the reason, but it makes a lot of sense.
I don't know that that's the reason either. But I just can't look at the four of them arrayed on a table and not be like, this is a much more adult looking girl than this child that is Luke Velaryon.
That's true.
Bela just looks like a grown woman.
It could be even a grown woman. It could be that Baratheon or most any lord would still accept a boy before.
I agree with that, which is why I think that the better argument
saying
is
they
to
should
do
have both
both.
gone.
Yes,
two of
right.
them.
I agree.
I think that
Maybe
is where I landed. That I think, and ultimately, I think Rhaenys and Luke together would have been the most optimal solution here.
Yeah, that would have been even better. Yeah. Because Rhaenys was going to go off and patrol the Gulf.
Yeah,
she
so
could
just
do that right after. One quick diplomatic
exactly.
mission, and then
It just makes sense to have
Or
someone.
some other dragon
let's not
rider
get
can go
bogged down on
patrol
that
the Gulf.
again. We've covered that part already. Let's get back to this. So Rhaenyra isn't quite sure what to do just yet. She's moving around, she's a little uncertain how to begin the session, a little unclear how to lead a war council. Not she's not afraid. She's just not really sure what she should be doing. And you can tell this because of the physical manifestation. Both Joe Magician and Kim Renfro, our guest on Saturday, said the same thing. They noticed the way she was gripping her fingers and kind of squeezing them, which is they say they both do that when they're not sure what to do or when they're a little out of sorts. So it was a good little clue there.
And obviously in the book, there's a whole thing with Rhaenyra. She has a nervous tick of playing with her rings, playing with her hands, and all that.
Okay, that's very similar. Yeah.
I want to point out that maybe she doesn't know exactly how to handle this situation, but it's not like all the other people do and she doesn't. No one knows exactly how to handle.
They act like they do,
and
they're showing more bravado.
They don't actually know. Right? They, in their minds, maybe even some of them do attack.
Yeah,
that's what we do, right?
We
Bodies
attack,
in graves. She doesn't know how to handle the situation because she's actually trying to stop war and think about the people and stop death, and so and is in the end responsible more so than these other people too. So I think that she has similar uncertainties as the others, but they're just more willing to. One of the guys even says it's easy for someone sending orders out from the castle to make that decree, but. Anyway, I feel the need to give her credit for whatever uncertainty she has, that it's not like everyone else has certainty and she doesn't. And the ones that do have certainty, I think, are wrong.
Yeah. So Damon begins the military discussions partly because Rhaenyra's not saying anything, though you get the impression that he would have done this anyway. There's a lot of lines straight from Fire and Blood. It was notable that there's just almost several moments that are just direct dialogue from the book, which is pretty neat. We'll go through the allies and all the military potential some other time. It's too big of a topic to squeeze into here right now, and we have so many things to cover. It's a big rabbit hole. We've kind of already talked about how they misplayed things at Storm's End. We'll maybe have a little more to say about that later. But it's a good example of overall what they've done. They take a lot for granted. They take a lot of allies for granted, the Storm's End being the biggest of those, which could happen elsewhere. They also kind of disagree on the Tullys. I don't mean just here. Like, they actually disagree on Grover Tully's disposition. And Damon's like, yeah, I'm going to go there and talk to him in person. But what I meant is the Greens were counting on the Tullys as allies already. So there's already some like, well, who's right here? You know, who's actually got the inside track?
I mean, Otto seemed to think that they would have this, that they could get the Starks, which seemed like a stretch to me too. When he seems like he barely knows the Starks if he thinks they would forget an oath. Like, he seemed way too confident that they could get the Starks to me.
I think he was just saying that. I think he was just blowing smoke. Because when they had their council session, he did not mention the Starks. He only mentioned the Starks on the Causeway. When it was like, let's contact our allies, he only mentioned Tully and Lannister at first when they were in the council session.
He also might not necessarily think he'll get Stark Bannerman to come ride into war with him, but he might get Stark Bannerman to not ride against him into war.
Yeah.
He might
get them to be neutral,
Yeah, and I also thought that that was one, I don't know, good call on Damon's part, is that he seemed to understand, like, whether or not we think we're going to get the Tullys, we have to get the Tullys. That was sort of a conclusion of that meeting. He's like, that's why I'm going. They're the key.
The river, he makes the point that the Riverlands is ultimately crucial because it allows them to surround King's Landing. Only a very small region of the Crown Lands is not bordered by the Riverlands. It's part of its southern borders on Storm's End, but that's where most of the water is, and they've got that pretty well covered by Blackwater Bay and cutting off the gullet and all that.
And the West too, like troops from the West have a lot more difficult time coming to join the fray if they go through the Riverlands as an enemy. But if the Riverlands are on their side too, it's not just that side; it's that both those sides get over very easily.
You're very right about that. And the Riverlands, especially the way into the Riverlands from the West, involves river crossings and mountain passes. So they can plop troops in a couple very specific areas to block their way. It's not like they have this wide plain they can cross, and there's lots of ways to get into the Riverlands. Not from that direction. There are lots of ways to get into the Riverlands from, say, the south, but not the north, not the west. So yeah, so you're totally right. Strategically, that's really important. So they argue about dragons. Damon and Lord Celtigar are like, let's just use the dragons right away. Let's just do it. This is our advantage. We have the bigger dragons, or not bigger. We have the quantity of dragons. They don't. Let's just get right to it. And interesting, did you notice, Sean, when he mentions the Rydell, he's like, we also have Vermithor, Sea Smoke, and Silverwing, and the camera cuts to Rhaenyra, who is still dragonless at this point.
I think they're setting up that Damon is going to try to get Rhaenyra to tame a dragon. Is my expectation from that, because how can he that's my, well, I guess as we talk more about the Daemon Vermithor scene, that's kind of my thought, is like maybe he's trying to like lay the groundwork and like set Vermithor up to be tamed by Rhaenyra, if you know what I mean. Like maybe he's like, oh, I'll sing lullabies to Vermithor and get Vermithor used to people and me, and then I'll be like, Rhaenyra, I've set this dragon up for you, and Rhaenyra's gonna be like, I'm too scared, or maybe she will go for it or something, like one of my big hopes for season 2 is to get scenes with Damon dealing with his dragonless daughter, which they seem to have very much set up him caring about this.
Yeah, good point.
I wondered a lot, like, where do you think they physically were there? It seemed like that was like a smooth, flat slab of stone that he was standing on. It didn't seem like some cave in the wild.
Oh, they were columns. It was carved.
Yeah,
that was some old building.
I think it was a Dragonstone type of dragon pit.
Yeah, they had carved out.
But this was a wild dragon.
No, that's not a wild dragon.
No,
it's not a wild dragon.
Not wild. That was Jaehaerys'
dragon used to have a rider that doesn't
Jaehaerys, the
anymore.
old king's dragon, hasn't had a dragon rider since Jaehaerys died, which obviously that was 20 plus years ago. So.
Wild dragon and riderless dragon are not the same thing. Wild dragon is never ridden, that lives in the wild. Riderless means currently had a rider, doesn't anymore. Those generally still live like they're domesticated, basically. They still live like they still get fed by humans.
I guess I want to also clarify, you guys seem pretty sure of which dragon this is. Is
Vermithor.
Yeah, we just know it's Vermithor. They said it in the Dragon Index said it was Vermithor or whatever. Like whatever.
Okay.
It was clear from that.
Yeah, I thought it maybe was a wild dragon, and he was taming it. Maybe he'd been leaving food for it or luring it there or something. And I thought it's possible, whether that's the case with this dragon or not, Daemon might just unleash dragons randomly. He might just direct them toward a city, and he doesn't care if they follow directions or they just burn stuff up and cause chaos.
As far as we know, that's not possible.
Okay.
I mean, they could decide it is, but there is no. That's never been done. Like we saw that with Dany's dragons followed her, but that was. Well, I guess like the books don't. That's not in the books either. So it's possible.
My thought here is that like whatever we know about what's possible or whatever for dragons, Damon doesn't know. So whether we think that it's possible for one person to tame 2 dragons, does Damon know that for sure? No. Why would he know? Maybe.
Well,
not
he would because he's read the books. Like he has access to all
my point is that that's still. Him saying like, oh well, the books say no one has 2 dragons. That still doesn't mean that you can't say, oh well, I'm just built different. I could do that.
Yeah. Like I was gonna say almost the opposite. I was like, whatever Daemon knows, we don't know. Like he might have learned stuff about dragons that we don't know.
You're right.
Or the books don't know.
Yeah, he could have read something that said that you can't tame 2 dragons, but you can have a close bond with multiple. Like he could have read other stuff. He's clearly is doing some research here. Yeah. But I tend to think that he's more trying to lay the groundwork for future dragon taming is my impression, because maybe you could say that he's like it's part of his egg hatching, like his egg collection, but I don't think that that's what he's doing here. So I think he's just going to be dealing with dragon taming next season, and he's like, well, the best way to have more dragon riders is if these dragons are a little bit more used to people, like before we send them.
I agree with that. Yeah.
He's going to teach this song to other people. Let's
bring this back.
Now.
We're way off of what we were trying to talk about right now. We jumped way ahead. So we're talking about using them in war, and Rhaenyra bringing up, look, we have these dragons. Yeah, we have more of them, but they have no experience with fighting. Like none of these, like they're just like unguided missiles. Like this isn't that helpful. Like at this point, we have to be more prepared. We have to have more of a strategy. And she brings up the histories. This is a little bit of a change from the books. It's Damon saying some of the stuff in the book, small change, but she says when dragons go to war, everything is destroyed. It's just mass devastation. That's what happens. So we're trying to avoid that. She's like, I'm going to listen to what the histories say and not just rush off to war with dragons, because apparently that's going to result in ash and bone. It's funny that they use the term ash and bone. Well, that phrase comes up several times in A Song of Ice and Fire proper. Not from Aerys. A lot of people think that's what Aerys says. He says charred meat and cooked bones. Similar, but not quite the same thing. But what's fun, where it does come up, in this scene, it's said by, the phrase ash and bone is said by Rhaenyra. In the book, it's said by Celtigar, who's one of the ones who says to use it's not said by Celtigar. It's said by Axel Florent, telling Stannis they should go loot Claw Isle, which is how Celtigar's Isle, and turn it into ash and bone. So in this episode, Celtigar says ash and bone, and then Axel Florent proposes to turn his castle into ash and bone 200 years later. So, which Stannis says no to that plan, and Davos as well, and that's when Davos gets named Hand. Anyway, now I'm getting off topic. So Damon gets annoyed with Rhaenyra's caution. He's had enough of this, like, look, we're in a war. Like, you are acting like we're not in a war, but we are. That's one of the things they seem to differ on. He's like, no, we're in a war. She's like, no, we're not actually in it yet. We're on the cusp. But he seems to think it's already there. To be fair, the reason for that, in part, I think, is that he believes blood's already been spilled. They've already killed his brother in his mind. Not true, but that's what he thinks. So he accuses her of, doesn't say she's being a coward, but kind of implies it by comparing her to her father, saying, you're being too cautious or whatever. But we've seen caution not being cowardice. We talked about that with Alicent, saying a reluctance to murder is not weakness. Similar vibe here, right? And
that same parallel I was pointing out between Rhaenyra and Alicent.
Yep. And again, she's right that there, even though there's a lot of value in getting the initiative and responding quickly, they just don't know what they're dealing with yet. They don't know who's on their side. They don't know who.
Yeah, at one point she says, like, I want to know who my allies are before I send them off to war. Like, they haven't even sent any ravens or,
And no one argued that. Sea Snake's like, Sea Snake kind of gives the big nod, like, you're right.
I also, about Damon, I feel like if somehow he knew that Viserys hadn't been killed in some, shady way, I don't think he would change. I think it would just be like Vaemond. When Vaemond, he was like, my bloodline. Like, well, have these kids married, then the bloodline's fine. Like, well, but still, I think Damon is the same way. He's just looking for this excuse to go to action, to take it out on Otto, to whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to believe that Viserys was killed because it makes him feel more justified, but he's just going to do the same thing anyway.
Yeah. Now, he also mentioned Harrenhal, Damon does, because Harrenhal is huge and it's central, and it would allow a place for their loyal forces to gather, and it's even closer to King's Landing than, say, River Run, which is not nearly as large. So he describes that pincer movement they would have. But again, he's getting ahead of himself. He's like, yeah, we'll have them all dead and by the end of the turn of the moon. Like, no, you won't. Okay, let's take a little short break here and then get back to it. We'll have some more questions. We'll talk about the meeting on the Causeway. We'll talk about the prophecy. We'll talk about the Sea Snake's grand return into the council session and lots of other good stuff. A word from our sponsor. The official Lord of the Rings Rings of Power podcast is out. It's only been out for a couple of weeks. I listened to the first episode right before this episode that we're recording right now. It was pretty awesome. Host Felicia Day, for one thing, that's great right off the bat. And Felicia Day knows her Tolkien. You may not have known that, but she knows her Tolkien lore quite well, which enables her to speak with the recurring large, great list of guests on a very deep level, detail level, and ask pointed questions, and she knows what she's talking about. Every single episode has guests. The first one, the one I said I just listened to, had Morfydd Clark. That's Galadriel. She is Welsh, and Tolkien built Elvish off of Welsh. So something that's kind of cool about Tolkien that is not as prominent or at all in a lot of other fandoms is that you have cases where like a grandfather read it to this father who read it to the son. You have like multi-generation fandoms within Lord of the Rings. You don't have that with Game of Thrones because it's only been around for 25 years.
Not yet. It's close.
Although I don't know if people should be reading this to their kids. Maybe to their young adult children, but not to their like young children. Maybe. That's up to you. Every single episode.
Dunkin' Egg, maybe.
Yeah, Dunkin' Egg's not so bad. Every single episode of the official Lord of the Rings podcast has J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay as well. A brief segment. Those are the two showrunners where they talk to Felicia about specific things from each episode. Each episode corresponds to one of the actual TV show episodes. So they've got a one-to-one relationship there. So watch The Rings of Power on Prime Video and listen to all 8 episodes of the official Lord of the Rings Rings of Power podcast for free on Amazon Music, and download the Amazon Music app now. You can listen to it there.
I think that the better option would be to not watch Lord of the Rings Rings of Power, but still listen to the podcast. I think that's the best way to do things. No, I'm kidding.
I watched the show, and I plan on listening to this podcast now that it's out. It's only been out, like I said, for like 2 weeks. And since I enjoyed the first one, I'm going to listen to the other 7, and perhaps I will report back on that.
I do know people who listen to podcasts about things that they've never watched.
That is interesting.
It's quite...
I have a couple friends that listen to us without watching the show.
Really? How about that?
Okay.
Maura says, do we think the prophecy is also carved on ice or some other relic? Ice meaning the Valyrian steel blade of House Stark. I wonder about that. I wouldn't think so, because of the way it's presented to us. It was Aegon's notion to carve it on his blade to pass it down to his people. I'm not sure that the Starks were ever involved in that. If they have their own version of the prophecy, if they interpreted it through some other magical means, they came upon it independently of the Targaryens, something we've talked about elsewhere, they may have written it down, carved it somewhere. I don't think it would be the exact same way, though. Also putting it on a blade, that seems like if they aren't working together, I doubt they use the same mechanism. You know what I mean? But the idea that it's written somewhere, yeah, I could see that. Or some different Starks have dreamt over it over the years, and maybe it didn't take hold because they didn't believe in it the same way the Targaryens did. Or maybe it did. But I suspect that will be explored in Season 2. We do know Jace is heading north, so stuff will happen. It'll probably be one of the first. I guarantee they're going to give us like trailer shots of Dragon going to Winterfell. That's going to get people hyped.
Yeah.
Like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, this episode was like, I don't necessarily mean this negatively, but it was almost like a cliffhanger. There were a lot of things in the works just about to happen that we're gonna have to wait for now.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. It's an odd. I wonder if they considered leaving it just with Vhagar flying away and not showing Rhaenyra's reaction, because even that was like, there's no dialogue. It's just like 20 seconds of her reacting and her face just like, whoa, that is acting right there. She really is just portraying a lot of emotions there. So let's talk about the Causeway scene. Another throwback. Episode 2 had the standoff on the Causeway. Here we have another one with almost the exact same group of people. Otto, Orwyle, and Sir Arik show up with guards. Last time it was Otto, Melos, the previous Grand Maester, so it's the Grand Maester in both cases, and different King's Guard and High Tower guards. Offer is similar to the book, similar to what we heard before. Keep your castles and inheritance, minus the throne, of course. Your kids get to be squires and pages, i.e. hostages. That's what that means. And Damon says he'd rather feed his sons to the dragons, which, if it was somebody else, I would think it's just a euphemism. But with Damon, he might actually mean it. He might actually prefer to feed his sons to the dragons. And he was hoping that they would get to feed Otto to the dragon right there. That's what he was really hoping for the outcome there to be. But yeah.
Well, one little quick thought. I wonder if bringing the Maester along is almost like, in modern times, like a reporter. Just a neutral observer. They're not going to attack you. You don't attack them. Because both times I thought it was weird to bring them on what seems like a dangerous mission, but maybe you just need a witness for history's sake or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it does kind of make sense. They are more likely to be the ones who write things down for posterity. Almost says for prosperity. Yeah, that too, I guess. So Otto is very controlled. He doesn't, to his credit, he doesn't get into the war of words. Rhaenyra even loses it a little bit with him, which is unusual because she's mostly been very stoic. She calls him an effing traitor and throws his handpin away in a rare break from decorum there. And Damon is just pacing as they're coming up the walkway. He's just pacing back and forth. The anger on display, the just pent-up aggression, is he does it so well. It's part of the reason I had to pick him as best actor for the episode.
You got to imagine he would have a lot of adrenaline flowing too. Yeah. Even if he was being more wise or fair about things, he would still be kind of pumped up for this moment.
Yeah, from his perspective, he's like, I got to talk to my brother's murderers? I got to talk to them? I can't. I'm like, I'm going to just kill them. And the page, Otto, pretty smooth actually. The page handing her the page, and that was clever. We did not see that coming. I was like, nice. Well, good writing there, I think. The page of Nymeria's book. And Rhaenyra does seem to give her I could have seen Rhaenyra getting more upset at that, like it was emotional manipulation. But she actually did kind of pull back a little at seeing that.
I had a thought on this, like even if it was emotional manipulation, or I even saw one take on Twitter that was that maybe it was a warning, like Nymeria fled, right? This is like maybe Allison said, "Hey, you need to run." Yeah, that's what I
took from it for sure.
Yeah, you should run.
But even if that is the case,
it was an overture of like remember our love and friendship, but it was also like, if you know what's best for you, you'll run. Remember, you said you wished you could do this. Yeah, exactly.
I missed that. You're totally right. Great catch, y'all. Yeah.
So if that was that could still be a warning or a threat. It could go both ways. But whether it was it or not, whether it was a warning or not, whether it was a manipulative, emotional thing, no matter what, she kept that page for, I don't know, 20 years or something.
20 years, yeah.
It had to mean something. It's no matter what, it's still indicative of the value of the relationship she had with her.
Yeah. So and it was a good way to portray that physically with just one
it was
object.
Yes, it was emotionally manipulative, but that's the card that Allison had to play, and she was manipulating a real emotion that they both shared between them. So, like, I don't know. I saw people who were like, I can't believe Allison did that. I'm like, oh, seems like a good play to me. Doesn't seem like
she emotionally manipulated her into saving her life. Like, if you're going to emotionally manipulate someone, this is the time to do it. It's like the way or the reason or whatever.
Yeah, it's like you lied to your kid about Santa Claus. Like,
I can't believe you emotionally manipulated people.
So there's, Yeah, so this is a great scene, I thought, and we have Cyrax landing behind, and the intimidation is there, and I like how Rhaenyra just walks right through them, which she did the first time, but the first time they were her allies, she just very bravely walks through the part. Of course, they're not likely to do anything with the dragon and Damon right there, but still, it is still kind of a boss move.
A couple things I want to point out. One is I think they were fair, reasonable, maybe realistic terms that were certainly come from Alicent and not Otto.
And that was pointed out. He's like, the Dowager Queen offers this. It's like, if it was me, I would have sent assassins. But
one other thing, I feel like Damon was very hypocritical there. He's like, I'll never listen to your drunk king.
Yeah.
Like, remember when Damon was drunk on the floor in front of Viserys? Like,
it's like, you're right. He is a drunk usurper, but
yeah.
So they go back inside. They start to talk. Damon gets furious that she's even considering the offer. And she's like, it's not like him. It's not like his offer I'm considering. It's the situation as a whole. It's like, well, what's my true duty as queen here? She is bringing up her father. Like, this is what her father wanted. And she's trying to rule, or at least keep his attitudes in play, which, to be fair, Alicent kind of did too. Kind of. At least she was sort of moved by that. She was trying to insert that in their grand plan, while these other things that were definitely against Viserys' wishes were also included. But
it's like if I said you shouldn't murder people, and someone said that's your dad speaking. Well, yeah, but that's also everyone. Like, I mean, I guess that's something my dad believes, but it's also just true, right? Like,
yeah. So the other lords are a bit perplexed. She's like, are you considering the offer here? Some of them are probably like, I hope she does. I don't want to go to war, but Damon, of course, is like, war, now, war. And she's like, all right, clear the room. And she's like, are you forgetting something here, man? Are you forgetting about Ice and Fire, Song of Ice and Fire prophecy? And he's like, what? What are you talking about? The three of us talked about this all season long, whether this moment, we knew this moment was coming in some way or another. We didn't know how it would play out. We were pretty sure he didn't know. We weren't 100% sure, but we were pretty sure that he didn't know. And so we were also pretty sure he would get mad, but we didn't predict this particular version of anger. And we also didn't know that it would come while he's already grieving and etc. So she's completely confused. He's completely confused. And when she starts to explain and mentions, my father told me when I became heir, all his bitterness and rage and the existing frustration comes and he chokes her. It was like very shocking.
She's lucky there wasn't a rock around for him to grab.
Good point. But it's odd too, because like to me, I'm thinking of that moment in episode 1, another callback where he says 10 years and not once have you asked me to be your hand. Like, this is in his mind. Like, you never told me about
10
this.
10 years and you never once told me this prophecy. He did not think of me as a legitimate heir.
Yeah. So
that's what he's realizing.
Very embarrassing to him.
You know, I know you guys gave me a lot of reasons why maybe he shouldn't make it complete public information, but I was still strongly believe he should have told a few key people for a bunch of different reasons. And this is one it's still hard to exactly pin down, but you gotta wonder if Damon would behave differently if he knew it. Rhaenyra expects him to behave differently because he knows about this, but he doesn't know about this.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe she's got him pegged wrong, but she married him. She's known him her whole life pretty much, and she thought that this should affect his behavior, and it doesn't seem to be because he didn't know. So I can't go back to thinking it's a mistake Viserys made of not telling at least a couple other people, Damon included.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Now maybe to be fair to Viserys, maybe the reason he didn't tell Damon is he knew he would have a reaction like this. Maybe not like quite like this, like choking him, but I mean like totally downplaying it and calling it stupid and idiotic or pointless or whatever. Like, God, you know, dragons made us kings, not dreams, or whatever. That line was from like the first trailer. Finally, we get it right at the end. So interesting too, though, is her reaction. Obviously, we can't excuse this sort of thing. We can't excuse it, especially because it probably in real life got some people to think about real domestic violence because it's kind of familiar, like too realistic in that sense. And so, with respect to anyone out there that felt that took that scene and made you feel uncomfortable. Rhaenyra, however, she just like hardly seemed bothered by it at all. She was more like surprised. She was still focused on the fact that he didn't know about it and what that meant to him. She was almost like sad for him. Even as he's choking her, she wasn't even like struggling. She was like, talk about stoic. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't afraid. She barely struggled. It's almost like she knew he wasn't going to do anything other than, like, he knew she was just, like, acting out or something.
It's funny because a lot of people were taken aback or upset or bothered by this moment, this character beat, whatever. But it made me think of the scene at the wedding with Damon and Rhaenyra that people thought was so romantic when he grabs her by her neck in the wedding scene.
That's a good point.
And like it just mirrors that very well to me, and like how I don't think that it was out of character or unusual for him, and I don't think that it's a character beat that makes it so that I can't appreciate that character anymore. But I also wasn't ooh-wooing, fangirling over Damon to the point where I was like, oh, he's an amazing father and husband and all these things. He's an amazing character, an interesting character. So it really didn't ruin it for me.
Yeah, I thought this was in character for him too. Like, this is a violent, aggressive man.
If he's willing to kill one wife, why wouldn't he be willing to choke or otherwise abuse another wife?
Yeah.
And it's also worth noting, in the real world, it's not like when a man abuses a woman, they always immediately leave. Like, they rarely immediately leave, right?
Yeah.
It's you're kind of stuck with them in certain ways. It's a crappy all around, but I don't think that it was really unrealistic or unfair.
No,
and
I mean, yeah,
it doesn't make it not tough. It doesn't make you enjoy it, and
maybe
some people still want to stand Damon or whatever.
You can criticize the writing choice because it might
be disturbing,
be too real, but I don't think you can criticize it as a out of character. Like, that's wild to me. Like, no, this is a violent, aggressive man who apologizes to no one and thinks everything he does is right, or thinks it's justified because he's doing it. So,
who was also in a particularly emotionally torn up moment.
Yes,
right?
Thinks his brother was just murdered. Thinks their throne is being stolen from them. Just lost his daughter. Like, Rhaenyra is torn up about that too, but so is he. Like, he did grieve over Visenya. Even though he wasn't very supportive about it, he's definitely sad about it. So he's not in like a normal state of mind.
Yeah, I think it can't go like unstated that Damon in this scenario is triggered by his experience with Laena. He saw his wife go through childbirth and lose the baby and kill herself. Like, how can he go through his wife giving birth and not think about this experience that he had with Laena?
Yeah.
So, like, I think that he shuts down emotionally there, but I think it's really not surprising or unusual, and it makes sense to me that he would shut down emotionally there and not be able to be there for her in childbirth when he just thinks about this, one of the worst things that has ever been part of his life.
That's a good point. And his grief, we have seen this, and I've even said it already this episode, that his grief, like a lot of men, even in the modern world, not all men, but and women sometimes too, but it's more common with men, manifest grief as anger or violence. Like, it comes out that way. Like, we're conditioned that way. We're taught that sadness is weakness, grief is weakness. But you're still going to have that emotion, so you channel it into something that's properly masculine, which is violence or anger.
You're supposed to fight, not cry.
Yes,
right.
So that's Damon was absolutely raised in that environment. Again, we're not excusing it, but this is the outcome of that sort of attitude and breeding in society.
Take it to the extreme. Aemond is like, "Oh, you don't want to cut out your eye, you coward."
Yeah, I know. You coward. You don't want to cut out your eye. It's like, all right, Luke should have said, "I've already cut out an eye. One's enough." I cut yours out. I wasn't afraid of that one. So some people thought maybe Damon was even crying in this scene, like as he's turning away, when he's releasing her, when he finally takes his hand off, like he turns away. There may have been tears in his eyes too. So and again, with the whole mind meld of the dragons, like there's subconscious back and forth maybe between the dragon bond and all that. Maybe that's going both ways, Maybe he's pushing his frustrations towards the dragon and is bouncing back to him. Maybe Cyrax is affecting Rhaenyra. I don't know. But it's a topic that bears further exploration. Definitely takes us into the theme of humans getting closer to dragons, like spirit-wise, like the metaphor of human and dragon, and which is Damon. He's a little of both. He's a little more dragon than a lot, like how Brandon Stark was more wolf than Ned was. Damon is as dragony as they come, I guess. Aemond is up there too, I suppose. Let's talk about the return of the sea snake. This is a real shot in the arm for Rhaenyra's side. First, they have the reunion scene, which we kind of discussed already. But and I did want to add one thing, that a near-death experience is something that can change people a lot. Like, I can't claim to have had one, but I've talked to people who have, and it's one of the
claim
biggest.
it.
I could claim it. It wouldn't be true. I guess I could claim, like, I've been in a car, almost was killed in a car accident a couple times. I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. I stood close to a ledge once. I could have fallen.
Oh, actually, I will say that Aziz, when we were at places like the Grand Canyon or the Cliffs of Moher or any dangerous cliffside, Aziz is so... He's come close to dying in my approximation. The way he climbs the side of these cliffs that could just fall out from under him.
Yeah.
Aziz could be a dragon rider, I think. I could not, but I think he could.
So I think that's part of what was going on with the sea snake, is that's part of why he had this like rethinking ambition thing, even though it's too late. So it's the perfect nautical metaphor fits here, which is putting the wind in our sails. He comes in, he looks a bit weak on his cane at first, but it's a powerful moment despite his physical, he's not fully recovered, we'll say. A little like Viserys coming into the throne room there. It's not as drawn out or as cinematic, but still, he's coming in to take over a bit, to deliver some news and make things right. He's like, so you need allies? How about me? My wife and her dragon, too. Don't forget about her. That's a big deal. The biggest navy in this part of the world. You want that? I got it. Also, and the Stepstones? Remember that? I got that, too. I took it all. It's mine. So it's yours. That is boom. Like, by the way, I'm going to blockade the capital, too. Like, this is massive. This is like, wow.
It reminded me a little of that time when Damon came into the throne room when he's coming back from the Stepstones, wearing a crown. And he handed the crown over. If Corlys came in and it would be hard to tell without context that Rhaenyra was the queen, and he was subordinate. It seemed like he was suddenly in charge of the room, but he turned it over to her.
That's a great point. I think that's actually a very strong parallel. Yeah, Damon giving it to Viserys, and here is Corlys giving it to Rhaenyra. That's well done. He could have been like, anything else I can do for y'all?
I thought it was so funny too, because Royce was like, where's Damon? And it was convenient for them that the person who killed his brother is not in the room right then. But I am curious about the interactions between Corlys and Damon. If Corlys both knows that Damon killed his brother and thinks that Damon killed Laenor.
Rhaenys did tell her.
Yeah,
or tell him, right?
Yeah,
Rhaenys
he knows
said
that
Damon
killed
Damon.
Yeah, he knows that, or he knows that. Yeah.
Yeah. Corlys knows that. Well, technically, we can assume that she said Damon killed your brother, but technically, what she said was that he was killed.
No, she said Damon took his head.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was clarified. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So that's got to give a lot of morale to not obviously to Rhaenyra, but to the other gathered lords who are kind of like, yeah, I don't know. We're starting off behind the 8 ball here. We're losing, but hearing that, it's like that's just a massive windfall of the biggest single ally they could have gained right there. Like the Lannisters aren't even that valuable at this point, especially given the proximity to the sea snake. They live right next door to each other. It's rather nice. The Driftmark and Dragonstone being so close. That's handy. All right, let's talk about Vermithor. This is where Damon was. So while Damon's off screen, they're talking about him. It's kind of like what is it? Poochie from The Simpsons. Whenever Poochie's not on screen, they got to be asking, where's Poochie? Where's Damon? So Damon goes, apparently this is where he goes when his temper is flared. He's like, I got to go be with the dragons. They're peaceful. those are creatures of great serenity. Yeah, there you go. There's a picture on screen. That's the very image of serenity and peace right there. That looks like the Rancor monster from Star Wars. Yeah, I told you there'd be more Star Wars references. So maybe like Ashaya said, maybe he's been bonding or just getting along with I love this. Just the way he's got a kinship. Like he likes the dragons. Like, But I also like that he's reconditioning them to I think get used to people again.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think that he is reconditioning. That he has a plan with this. That he's like, we're gonna get some people to tame all these dragons, and he might be like, well, I have one person in mind right now, and he might think of other people that could potentially tame a dragon. For sure, because there is Rhaena, but there's potentially some other options for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and presumably there will be new options introduced as well. That's there's ways to do that, as we've seen.
I gotta say, the scene when Damon was like put the Kingsguard in front of Caraxes there, what I thought was gonna happen was that he was gonna be like, here's a test of loyalty. I'm gonna make these Kingsguard try to tame a dragon. That's like, I don't know, that's just what I was expecting, that he was gonna ask them to try to tame a dragon, weirdly.
Like, no thanks, sir.
I guess because I really couldn't see what else Damon could be doing there.
Yeah, like, how does this relate to our guarding of the queen? Can you please frame this in? And how about that moment where Vermithor's eyes have Daemon in them, and then Daemon's eyes have Vermithor? That was just like super suggestive of like mind melding, bonding. Yeah, like just Daemon being a dragon, like bonding with his dragon side. Mm-hmm. This is the second largest dragon, next to Vhagar, of course. Its nickname is the Bronze Fury. This one is a male, apparently, ridden by Jaehaerys, the old king. His queen, Alysanne, rode Silverwing, who was also mentioned in that same scene where he mentions the riderless dragon. Silverwing, Vermithor, and Seasmoke, who we, of course, have seen already. And those two dragons, potentially Silverwing and Vermithor, have a bit of a connection, too, because their riders had a connection. So it's another piece of evidence that the rider and dragon, they're feeling each other a bit. So, like, Alysanne and Jaehaerys were in love, and their dragons maybe weren't in love. Maybe it isn't the right word, but they seem to have a fondness for each other. That isn't. We haven't even seen Silverwing yet, so we don't know if that's going to be in the show. But I bet they're going to show that, because any kind of like behavioral, like mind melding stuff, I think they want to show that because they've added to it. Why not take what they've already got from the books?
Yeah, they've shown that with Syrax and Caraxes, with Syraxes. Like behind the scenes, they talked about how like Caraxes was singing at Syrax, and generally, yeah, they've set up that they have a connection there. And I guess I'll bring it up now. With little Arax, for example, which is a new cradle egg dragon, like a relatively newly hatched dragon, you have to imagine that, well, whose parents? What clutch of eggs did Arax come from? And I really liked the theory I saw that it was Syrax and Seasmoke, because when you look at Arax, Arax has a bit of the coloring of Seasmoke, but a little bit of the face of them. Like it just makes sense to me. So like in a way, Luke's dragon was the child of Laenor's dragon and Rhaenyra, so he had like this connection.
Arax to me, I like that comparison. Arax to me looks, and this is a very similar idea, to the color of Valyrian steel. Smoky gray with red streaks.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's how Tabo Mott described. He's like trying to make ice. When he reforges ice, he's like, I added the red and the red and the red, and it just wouldn't be the red I wanted. It kept going darker. And Tywin's like, oh no, this is totally fine. Even Tywin was like, yeah, this is cool. And yeah, so those are the colors I feel like Arax represents very nicely.
By the way, I think it was Anthony asked earlier about my favorite dragon name.
Yeah.
And I clarified, can I pick something outside of I'm going to pick Arcades.
Oh,
Arcades, a magic card, a dragon.
Cool.
Arcades.
Gotcha.
From Legends. They've reprinted new versions of it, but yeah, that's one.
Okay. Okay, so here's the song. Here's what Damon actually says. He sings in High Valyrian to Vermithor, and here's the translation.
Are you going to read it, Aziz?
Yeah. Fire breather, winged leader.
Actually, you got to read it like beat poetry.
Fire breather, winged leader, but 2 heads to a third sing. From my voice, fires have spoken, and the price has been paid with blood magic. With words of flame, with clear eyes, to bind the 3, to you I sing. As one we gather, and with 3 heads, we shall fly as we were destined, beautifully, freely. So, of course, it doesn't rhyme because it's written in Valyrian.
Yeah. It would rhyme a little better in Valyrian.
It doesn't have to rhyme anyway. That's not necessary.
Yeah, it's poetic. It's good. So, yeah, once again, that's written by T. McKell with an assist from David J. Peterson. And T is the show consultant. She's one of the first names that appears in the credits.
I'm happy to also say that in the chat earlier, I saw that I was talking. When I asked if you would sing the song, Aziz, we got a chat from Dom Tartaglia, who's cosplayed as Daemon Targaryen, who said he's 1,000% gonna sing it at Ice and Fire Con.
Excellent.
So we should get a live performance of Daemon singing that.
That sounds great. Yeah, we'll get a recording and we can spread that around. Yes. So well done. A very big 2 thumbs up to the show for that moment. I love that. That was really good. Great scene, great music, great writing. So contrast this moment, though, in terms of besides the song. Like, Aemond first approaches Vhagar, and Vhagar is like almost torches Aemond before he like backs her down. Vermithor's like, I don't know if he is happy here or something, because he sprays fire, but he's spraying it up. He's clearly not trying to hit Damon. He's almost like, it's like, I get it. I know what it is. It's like holding your lighter at the concert. That's what he was doing. Damon's singing, and Vermithor is like, yeah, this is my jam. This is my song. Yeah, the happy dragon breathing fire. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was just cool. I don't know that there's a whole lot, but what emotion is in play there? Yeah, is the dragon like lonely, or I don't know. It's really hard. Who knows the mind of a great beast like that?
Suspicious, hungry.
Hungry. They're always hungry. That's a safe assumption. It's like
Damon seemed anxious. You know, he didn't just boldly, calmly march on down her. He stepped carefully. It seemed like the song was as much to calm himself as anything. He gently laid the torch down.
He's not scared, but wary, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this could go wrong. And I wonder why does he put the torch down? Like, I wonder why does he set it on the ground? Like, I wonder if there's anything to that, or if it just looks cool.
Maybe
there just isn't a place to put it in the wall.
Yeah.
There's no.
I mean, but why did he need to even put it down? Like, he's singing. Like, what does he need his hands for?
Why doesn't he keep it in his hand?
Yeah, why didn't he just keep holding it? That's
maybe he wanted to be able to step back. Maybe he wanted to present the light to the dragon, but not himself be in the dragon's face.
He can run into the darkness. Like, the dragon can follow him if he's like, if he needs to get away. Like, the dragon sees where he's running. That could be it. Kizzy sends a super chat, says, I thought after Damon was done singing, he'd walk out and Caraxes would be waiting outside giving him the stink eye for wooing him. And the dragon's like, are you cheating on me? I do really appreciate that the more the season goes on, the more we see of these dragons. And because of CGI, we don't get long, drawn-out scenes with them usually. So they got to be a little bit economical with it. But they do have personalities and like little things you can tell. Like, Caraxes has that very distinct like siren that you hear it coming before you see him, and you're like, "Oh, that's Caraxes." That is a very distinct. That's the Caraxes siren, the Cariren. I don't know. And so I'm sure some of the other dragons, maybe we'll get some more of their mannerisms or their habit. Like Vhagar is like, people are calling her grandma and things like that.
Like a klaxon horn is what you make me think of.
Yeah, a klaxon. Yes,
Klaxon
that's
horn.
right. The Caraxes klaxon.
Yeah.
Calaxy. It's getting tricky. Tongue-tied here.
I've got a flame of my dragon.
I was going to try, but decided not to.
This is worse than any Irish wristwatch has ever been. So Jace going north seems. We talked about Luke maybe not being ready to be a diplomatic envoy. Jace seems fine. He seems perfectly ready to do this. I think. I mean, I'm no expert on the matter, but he seems like serious and not easily intimidated.
And he's being sent on, I think, as much as it's the farther mission and more difficult mission in some ways, I think it is the easier mission ultimately, in that the Starks are very honorable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's that as well. That like he's not really being sent into as much danger as like Luke being sent not only to Boros, who like I just feel like Rhaenyra shouldn't have been as confident, but to Storm's End, where the literally the flying, like disregarding Aemond, I feel like it's entirely possible for Luke to have just died in that storm. Period. Like that's how stormy it was. It just looks dangerous in general.
I was going to say, I bet that they have had moments where they were flying in storms and knew it was scary or risky or whatever. And I bet they know it's called Storm's End. Like it probably, I think he knew it was a dangerous flight, like you said, even aside from encountering a foe, or I don't know, standing up to this lord, all the other things he's got to do there.
In fact, this is not stated or hardly even implied, but pretty sure this is autumn, which when the storms are at their worst, and which means, because I'm pretty sure their winter is coming. I mean, obviously they could change how that works, but
winter is always coming.
That's true. Winter is always coming. So
can I
go ahead?
I want to say real quick that Jace as you said, like seemed more prepared. I think that they, at least, I don't know, emotionally or psychologically or whatever. Remember how he had more of an auto instinct to call Rhaenyra Your Grace, whereas Jace did. I might have said that wrong, but Luke had to correct himself. He's like, "Yes, mother. I mean, Your Grace."
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. It shows right there that one was a little bit more prepared, and yeah, you're right.
More like courtly and prepared. Yeah, great. That's a great.
Another thing I thought was really interesting. They made a point of her having him swear to the 7, and she brought out that, I don't know, Bible, if you will, to have them put their hand on and swear by. I thought, I thought that was a very interesting moment that they were making a point of including there. That I don't know how much that's Rhaenyra has accepted it herself, or she's trying to get her sons to realize they need to. Like that, she didn't coach them specifically, but I can imagine it being a tool in Luke's belt if he's challenged. He's like, I swear by the 7, like I really did it. I put my hand on the Bible. You know, I wonder how much more that'll come into play. You guys maybe know more than me about where the books go, but I feel like that wasn't random. That was planting a seed of some sort.
Right on. So yeah, we talked about how this was a mistake, potentially how they could have done different things, like sending Rhaenys or different combinations of envoys, sending Luke with someone else. But the plus side, and this isn't explained, but here's part of the plus side of sending them, and this isn't necessarily a counter argument because they could have done both of these things. They could have, like you said, send Luke plus somebody else. What it shows is there's a lot of rumors that these kids are bastards. Well, they probably are, but showing up on Dragonback, really, like, okay, that's weird that you have brown hair, but you have a dragon. You are clearly flying that dragon. Maybe they can't explain the brown hair part, but you don't need to explain the dragon. That's clearly visibly happening. It's like, okay, that only a Targaryen does that. So, all right, well, maybe they are bastards, but that's a dragon rider, and he's in my courtyard, and yeah. So that's pretty important. And when Boros comes and says, which of my daughters will you marry? He's got 4 daughters. Aemond has already chosen. You can kind of see where everybody's standing. He says, I've married this one. It's Floris is her name, by the way.
I was going to ask that question. Who was that woman standing next to Aemond?
Yeah, so he has 4 daughters, Floris, Cassandra, Maris, and
the rest.
The rest. There's one more. Floris, Cassandra.
But are you saying that Aemond has already married her?
No,
he's agreed to betroth her.
Just then, he just agreed to betroth her.
Yeah. Who's the other one? Anyway, Floris, Maris, Cassandra, and
Ellen.
Ellen. Yeah, Ellen. That's right.
Yeah,
okay, so
right. Got it.
So he agrees to marry her, and the other 3 are standing there like, well, and
which would you pick?
Which would you pick?
I'd marry the middle one.
I don't know. I'd like to talk to them first,
That's so nice of you, Assis. You're so honorable. I'm just like,
I feel like they're all too old for him.
Yeah. Well, I know.
I feel like if that had been a 14-year-old girl and 3 30-year-old men looking over there, it would have been a little creepier.
Yeah, no, I did have that thought because I was like, well, Rhaenyra should have prepared Luke to be like, hey, if he's not amenable, maybe give him a counteroffer, like betroth your brother Joffrey to someone. But Joffrey is like 7, and these girls are like adults.
Yeah, so that you're right. Might not have gone over well, but it would have been at least worth
an offer.
An offer.
Yeah, it would have been worth the offer for sure. Like he had she just didn't tell him any. She just really didn't seem to prepare him.
He was not prepared.
Yeah, it's just that simple. Because like I feel like it should be a pretty obvious thing to tell your envoy. Okay, and if they don't like these terms, here's what you do. And maybe she did. Maybe she said, and if he doesn't like the terms, you turn around and you come home.
It's just such an assumption. They made such a bad assumption. Like, oh, he'll just be happy you came and be like, yeah, I'm on your side. That is just not how proud nobles think. That is especially not one that's connected to House Targaryen like the Baratheons are. They haven't had a marriage to House Targaryen since Rhaenys' mom, Jocelyn, married the heir to the throne, Aemond, the son of Jaehaerys and Alysanne. But of course he died before he could take the throne. So the Baratheons used to be kind of included in these marriages like the Velaryons are, but it's kind of like the Hightowers took their spot. So maybe that would have been in their brain like, oh, well, the Hightowers are the ones moving in. But the Hightowers are the ones offering them a seat at the table now. They're the ones bringing them back in the fold. So, yeah, the recurring theme of them taking things for granted really bites them here. Again, I use the biting metaphor.
Even if Aemond and Vhagar hadn't gotten there first, it still might not have gone over that well, right?
You're right.
It might have gone over better. It might have been tougher when Aemond did show up. But it's it's too late now, but it is interesting to think about.
Yeah, totally. TKOK Podcast Network. Great having the gang back together for coverage. Thanks, Tommy. Check out the TKOK Podcast Network when you get the chance, folks. Great stuff going on over there. Yeah, it is great having us all back together. It is so much fun. We're going to miss it, but we'll be doing other stuff in the off season, and the future is bright. What's not so bright was Storm's End. Very dark, brilliant cinema. Vhagar emerging from behind the castle. Woo! That was something. Wow, like Dragon Godzilla or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, wow. The way her like dewlap shook when she roared, it was like, yikes, that's the scariest dewlap I've ever seen.
Dewlap.
Never been intimidated by a dewlap. The throat hanging down part, that's a dewlap.
Yeah.
Turtles have that. Lizards, a lot of lizards have that.
Called it a
Yeah, the little
dewlap.
hanging, the bit that hangs
I've
down.
always called it like a goiter or whatever.
Goiter.
That's what it made me think of. But
A
yeah,
football-sized goiter on her neck.
yeah, that's what I
Did this-
thought of.
Did this dragon date Indira Gandhi or Mahatma Gandhi?
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. Seinfeld reference there.
So
So that was really intimidating and cinematic and awesome. And then Aemond's eye. What do you think of Aemond's sapphire eye, Sean? That was surprising, huh?
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm not against it in any way, but I don't know. I don't know. I found it odd. I don't know if it's something he's doing to be intimidating. I assume it's something from the books. Maybe it's
It's from the book.
show of wealth or something. But yeah.
Well, here, what I wasn't expecting was it to give off a White Walker vibe. Like he's giving off a Euron vibe.
Ooh,
Euron,
yeah.
like Night King, White Walker, big dragon. Blue eye that's a very similar blue to the White Walker blue, and kind of projecting death, all that kind of thing.
Because I feel like an eye patch with a big scar, that's pretty intimidating enough,
That's true. That's true.
Well, then you need to be able to level up somehow. So as you see,
Yeah.
There was like a suggestion of a pupil in that blue. It almost looked serpentine, like there was a little. It almost looked like a real eye.
I really liked the idea that Aemond gets multiple gemstones for different occasions to accessorize.
Mood rings.
So
Oh, I like that.
so
yeah.
sometimes he's got an emerald. Looks like an emerald would make the most sense, like something green for the greens. But yeah, just the idea that he's fashionable with it. Would love that.
You have a mood ring. I have a mood eye. We are not alike. Yep.
But no, I prefer how he looks with the eye patch. Ultimately, the eye is a little uncanny valley for me. A little too CGI, pun intended there for me. But it is like a little bit. Like I don't know what I expected it to look like, but I didn't expect it to look so magical, almost really. And maybe that's just how Sapphire would look in that situation. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But I doubt that we'll see him with a sapphire out most of the time because it's just so much easier for them to do the eye patch.
Probably. Yeah.
If at some point he pops it out and throws it, he's like riding dragons along, and it's like a little missile weapon. He
Like
pops someone in
marbles?
the
That would
head,
be
Well, I'm
badass.
picturing-
throws him off guard, and
Like,
Or if he
I
just
bet
like
it's like
pushes
the
a button and
cart
it just starts
falls-
launching
yeah.
repeated gems out of his eye, like over and over, like pushes. Actually, I saw on Reddit last night a man who lost his eye and implanted a flashlight in his left eye, a completely self-contained
Whoa.
battery, doesn't get too hot, and he can like turn it on and put it in his eye, and walks around with a flashlight eye, and he uses it to read at night. It's amazing. It's like, whoa, and he designed it himself. It's like, what? So
if he made it red, he'd be like a Borg.
yeah. Or all sorts of villains. Yeah, he could change the color. Yeah, he could do all sorts of great Halloween costumes with that.
Can we talk a little bit about the dragon fight?
Yeah. I wanted to lead into it with the emotions that set it up, and then
Okay, yeah.
then you'll let you take away from there. So I call this like storms rage like emotions. The storms are raging like the feelings that these two young men are having. Arax is probably feeling Luke's fear. Luke was intimidated the whole time by the storm, by what he was asked to do, by Aemond, by Boros, by failing, by Vhagar, and Arax was reacting to that. And probably reacting on his own to the presence of Vhagar, which is probably intimidating for a small dragon to be so near to such a gigantic older dragon. Considering they aren't exactly like friendly animals, as far as we can tell for the most part. And Vhagar on the other side, all this talk of subconscious bond, of the feeling going back and forth, Aemond is very likely transmitting feelings of revenge, hatred, vindictiveness that aren't going to have the nuance of, I only want just your eye. Like, Vhagar's not going to get that nuance. It's just Aemond's restraint is too nuanced for Vhagar to feel. Vhagar only feels the outlines of this emotion. There's no detail to it. So, to me, I think that's a big part of what's in play here. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, one little follow-up. I don't know. I'm not sure if Aemond really expected to actually get Luke's eye either. Like, maybe he did, but I feel like he was just bullying him back. Like, he had been bullied in his youth, and now it's his turn to push him around. And maybe it's not exactly all in fun and games or whatever, but I don't think it was murderous, and I don't even think he really expected to get his eye. I think he just wanted to put him in his place. He wanted to assert himself over him, et cetera, et cetera.
Taunting teenager, a bully. Yeah, it was very bullying. Yeah. Most bullies don't have gigantic dragons, right? I mean, it's like a rich kid with a motorcycle, like getting close to his friends, like buzzing them, like sliding up right next to them, like being dangerous, being reckless.
It is like that. You're right. And sometimes in those situations, someone would die, and that person still killed the other person. Like, I don't excuse Aemond, which is why I think it worked really well for me, right? Which is that, like, he is not absolved here. He still did a terrible thing, but it adds nuance to it to where I can still be like, oh, I like Aemond. Whereas if Aemond had just maliciously killed this child, there wouldn't be as much. Like, I could still appreciate his character, sure, but
it's not as nuanced.
It's just not.
He's not exactly innocent, but there is a difference between being reckless and being murderous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
exactly. There is,
and I think they did a good job of balancing that through the acting and the action. I think they did a good job of getting that across well.
Yeah,
I had to go back and watch the second time to fully understand what happened, because I didn't understand the flyby that Arax did when he burned Vhagar. Mm-hmm. That I didn't catch. Jace was like, no.
Luke,
like,
don't
Jace
do that. Luke,
sorry.
Luke,
Jace was
trust your feelings.
To stop him from doing it.
He says, Arax.
Oh, you even had it on screen. No, Arax, no.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to say was I really appreciated how this was presented from, I don't know how to say this, a physics standpoint or whatever. I was really worried about some of the
just looking hokey
if I was
or whatever.
Believe these right, and it looked really good. Because the reality is, some pieces here is it. The advantage, if you will, that the smaller dragon would have is maneuverability.
Yeah.
Like, if they're flying along, if the little dragon cuts and turns, the big dragon will have to, like, swoop way out.
So, like, wide arcs.
Exactly. And like, at top speed, the big dragon would outdo him, but as long as the small dragon keeps weaving and bobbing, it'd be hard for the big dragon to catch up. Now, maybe in the midst of that, one well-aimed blast of fire might still get the small one. But the small one might get away, especially if Vhagar and or Aemond aren't actively trying to blast them with fire. But there's no way Arax is ever going to beat Vhagar, right? You might be able to whip around and
you might be able to kill the rider, but you're not going to kill the dragon.
See, the thing here,
maybe even get the rider,
It drove me crazy, Sean, was there's this perfect moment where Arax and Luke are, like, in those cliffs, or like they're in, like, land, right? In those little, and I'm like, just stop, just like
land there.
Land there. Get on the ground.
Just like, Vhagar cannot get to you there. Aemond will have to get down. Like, you're safe there. Like, I get that, like, why Luke was like, I just need to get away. I just need to escape. Like, I get that it was hard, like, easier said than done. Maybe you couldn't have stopped.
Maybe there was nowhere to land. Yeah,
maybe there was nowhere to land. But even if you can't land, just keep flying in circles, like, right under that little. I don't know. It might have been. It got me. I was
narrow
yelling
to land or go in circles. Maybe even if he did land, maybe then, like, Vhagar can still breathe fire down that crevice, or ground troops just show up and surround. And, like, I was yelling at the TV, just land, you're there, you're safe. But I realized, like, well, maybe it wasn't necessarily safe. But
and also he's panicked. Like, Luke was panicked. He's not going to have, like, he's not going to be clear-headed.
And Arax also,
Arax
right? Luke might have been
not,
telling him land. I was like, I'm not landing.
Like,
That's true. That's true.
That's true. Yeah.
So another little thought in this that I not quite sure if it was specifically accounted for in the action, but like I said, I feel like the action mostly made sense. But something didn't occur to me is that our friend Adrian, we watched with Michael and Adrian.
Oh,
and,
awesome!
They pointed out she rows. She does, like, professional rowing, like, boat races. Crew. And she said that in a storm,
Oh.
the bigger dragon would actually have more advantage when it comes to maneuverability.
That's pointed out in Fire and Blood.
Their momentum and their weight wouldn't be affected as much by the wind and the rain as a little.
It's implied or not implied. It's stated pretty much outright in Fire and Blood. If it wasn't for the storm, Arax probably gets away. Yeah. So there you go. You're totally right. I'm glad Adrian backed that up with some knowledge from some real experience there. Yeah. Well said, Sean. A lot of great points there. Shout out to our friend Nina. She meant another Star Wars reference. She said that moment where Arax was flying through the cliffs was kind of like pod racing. Had that tension of whoa, don't hit the wall. You could bump into the wall in a second here. It's like, wait. In Star Wars, you can realize, okay, this is Anakin. He's not going to die. But Luke, I don't know. Okay, he dies 2 minutes later. Yeah. So just
so you know, I was shocked just having not read.
Hey,
the books.
You didn't know that was coming. You did not know that was coming. Yeah, I was wondering what an unsullied person was thinking in that moment. What's going to happen here? There's my New Hope shot.
I did say a couple times, I was like, I don't know if he's coming back home. You know, I was worried. I didn't know quite. And then when Vhagar was there, it almost made me feel more comfortable that they revealed the threat. It's like, oh, I see how this is going. But it maybe reeled me back from fear of him dying right there. Just the plan's not going to work. So anyway, it was
well done, huh? Yeah.
two things here. One, I really appreciated in the behind the scenes House the Dragons built. They showed that how they did the blocking for this dragon battle, for this fight between them, which was Greg Yaitanes and Pedro, the DP. They got some dragon toys. And they got a camera, and they just held it all up. You're muted, Sean, if you say anything, by the way. But they got some dragon toys, and they held it up, and they just mocked up what it would look like, zooming in and all that. They just had a little playtime, imaginary playtime, which I thought was so cool. One other thing I wanted to say was that Boros Baratheon was a terrible host. I know that he was trying to get them out of his hall or whatever, but you look at that storm out there and you say, yeah, go fly home, boy. I just
they're just too used to storms there at Storm's End. It's just we just don't think about it.
I just can't imagine sending you home to drive in that storm. You know what I mean? I'd be stay
the night,
tonight.
Young prince.
Yeah,
and you can go home. Let me give you a couple. You even offer him bread and salt. That's how you treat a prince.
Yeah, you're right. He didn't. There was no guest offered.
So Rhaenyra's grief is the final moment of the season. All that grief and rage of Damon, which is so prominent. This final moment, we don't even really see his face. It's really focused on her. We kind of know what's happening. It's got that effect they've done a few times where all the sounds are muted and there's some music and it's like a dreamscape almost. And you only see the back of Damon's head. You know what's happening. He's walking to go tell her what's just happened to her son.
I wonder how much time had to have passed there for them to get that information.
Couldn't have been that long.
I figured they know because a dragon body washed up on shore.
Yeah, it could have been I'm guessing it was just a couple of days.
Yeah, but I'm just the logistics of that information passing. So I just sometimes gets in my head. I'm how did that happen? What?
I feel realistically, it had to be more than a couple days. If you think about it, even if someone saw it at the exact moment it happened, they sail off in this crazy
storm. Well, no, a raven.
Right
a raven would get there pretty the raven could get there in one day.
Yeah, a raven could be.
The Lord of Storm's End would even he might not tell. He might be wait, but but you could easily see why.
But it also assumes someone knew the moment that it happened.
Well, we do know not from the show, but we do know from the book that people were watching from the battlements or whatever. So they knew. So they would have reason to maybe go look for a corpse. Even if they didn't see a dragon die, they might be I don't know what happened there, but we could go look and see.
I guess in my head, I'm how would they have even seen these dragons fighting? But I'm Arax did blow one thing of fire there, and so if someone looks up in the skies and they see dragon fire in the skies, that is telling that there's something going on there. Even if you can't see much because of the storm, they could at least see maybe the fire.
So there's
maybe when he was flying over that crevice too, that might have been more visible.
Yeah,
it seemed like
he's in the crevice
far away and high, but they might have come back and forth and around a bunch of times.
Yeah. So
I buy it.
There's one small tidbit, non-spoilery, but from the book, where there's a poetic version, a song version, where Luke doesn't die, where he survives the fall and has no memory of who he was, and and falls in love with a fisherman's daughter that finds him, and they live happily ever after. And it's possible that's the inspiration for Rhaenyra getting away and living a life off the page, because it's no one, like, the histories don't take it seriously. Like, this is clearly not what happened, but we'll throw that in there for the hell of it, because it's history in that it's a story that people told, so that makes it historical, even though they recognize it as just not fact. So yeah, back to Rhaenyra and her grief. She was just, there's so many emotions going on at once. She was holding it in so well. The grief, the rage. She's lost her daughter, her father. She was feeling betrayed by Alicent, and all this responsibility rushing on her at once, having the throne stolen, but she still was keeping it together. Like, her focus was there. She may not have known exactly what to do, but her disposition was strong, if confused at times.
Grief and rage, for sure, and those are kind of extreme, maybe rage especially, but also frustration, confusion, anxiety, on and on, with the swirls of all sorts of basically negative emotions.
Yeah. And she held it in really well, but the loss of Luke was way too much. It just blows all that other stuff away in terms of its weight on her. Emma Darcy said Rhaenyra took a lot for granted, which yes, she did. We've said that a lot about Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra took a lot for granted. A lot of people in this story have taken a lot for granted. But what Emma said was that Rhaenyra even took grief for granted. Word of her father's death and her mother's death way back then, that was her experience with grief, which was not trivial by any means, but this, even losing an infant wasn't like this. She thought she knew what grief was until she lost Luke. So that's like the last thing we get from her this season. So that's Emma Darcy's take, how they played that moment. That was what they had. That's what they were thinking to frame their mind state for that scene. And that makes a lot of sense. It's like, yeah, that's harsh, but it's fitting. And there's guilt now too, though. There's going to be some guilt. She doesn't have guilt over her father over Emma. That's not her fault. Like, she had nothing to do with that. But she just sent her
Luke
son
on that mission.
Yeah. Even if it's not her fault. And we did criticize the decision, so we would have to say, it wasn't a good idea. She's still going to blame herself, even if she doesn't think even if she thinks it was bad luck
or not blame herself. This will give her more reason to be mad at
she could be in denial.
Aemond, whoever else. Like, even though
where does she choose to put this
as a way to cover your guilt is to displace it onto other
exactly.
people.
Good point.
Right.
Yeah, I can't assume how she's going to handle it. We have just vague ideas from the book, which is still Maester's perspective from a distance. This is the kind of stuff that the show does really well, because we actually get these amazing, talented actors portraying emotions that no book could ever portray, because there's no facial expressions and body language and just obvious stuff that books don't do. Books have their own strengths, but not that.
Music adds a lot.
Yeah,
for example,
for sure.
Lighting,
like
editing.
You're right. Like
the zoom in of the camera
in that moment, her face is conveying so much, but the music is just boosting it all. Like, it's adding to that. The emphasis is so much greater. You're right. So yeah, shout out to Ramin for his amazing work as the composer for this show. He is our John Williams. Hey, Star Wars yet again, right?
Yeah.
That's about the 8th time we've mentioned Star Wars this episode. Or I think I've done it all 8 times.
Exclusively. Yeah, I know. It's funny.
I've been with you for all of them, though.
Yeah, we're with you in spirit. Yeah. We got in a chat. You were like, they're like, I appreciate Aziz shouting out a little known indie film known as Star Wars.
Luke could have skywalked, but no, he fell.
Right.
Just doesn't tested that theory. Yeah, it didn't work so well. All right, folks. Well, like I said, the season is over, but we're not done. We'll be back with more episodes, more fun stuff. We'll be able to take a look at some of these character journeys, looking forward to what's to come. We'll have more spoilery episodes, more non-spoilery episodes, plenty of both. We'll get back to some book coverage. The future's still bright, y'all, like a Vermithor lighting the cave, or
hopefully we'll have some
sheen
more
off Sunfire's scales.
Hopefully we'll have some more George reports and interviews and panels and whatnot to report for you in the next month too. As we said, we have those 2 events, so hopefully I'm also hoping that we get some announcements for some House of the Dragon stuff that we get to talk about.
Maybe other successor show stuff. Maybe HBO's like, all right, this was a success, what's our next move?
I was gonna say that we'll probably talk about this more in other kind of season finale coverage type stuff. But you guys remember, like, when this was first coming up on the horizon, I was a little suspicious. I was like, I don't know. It's just going to be a bunch of, they're going to start off where season 8 left or whatever. I'm less interested in dragon battles and personal relationships. And Izzy was like, HBO's got a good track record. You know, we got a lot of reasons to be hopeful. And at the end of this, I'm like, all right, bring on Jon Snow. I'm like, when that first came out, I was like, what? Seriously? But now I'm like, all right, I'm trusting him now. I'm ready for it. So.
Yeah, like it might not work out, but yeah, bring it. Let's give it a chance.
This is done so well. I have much higher hopes for whatever's next.
It's their most watched finale since season 8's finale of any show they've done. So I'm sure the HBO executives are like, good. Yes, it's all going according to plan. And that works for us. All right, folks. Yeah, so time to say goodbye for this episode. Thanks to everyone who came by and said hello to support the live stream or participated in the chat. So our next stream
is Halloween night.
That's right, next Monday. Same usual time on Monday. So you could get in a little trick-or-treating and then come over to hang out with us on our stream.
Or I guess vice versa. Depends on where you live.
That's right. Depends on where you live. And
same time, same place.
Yep, that's right. Mm-hmm. And the guests are TBA. We have some lined up already, but I will refrain from announcing them until we have them all lined up, so we can announce them all at once.
Oh, and we'll be on X-Ray Vision this week, too.
That's right. Shea and I will be on X-Ray Vision again. We were on it earlier. I was on it earlier this year, and now Shea will be joining me.
Last week.
Yeah, so we're both going to be on it this time with Jason Concepcion. That'll be fun. We're going to be looking ahead to what's coming, talking about what might be in season 2, things like that. So that'll be a spoilery one, and that should be a good time. So check that out. Also, check out our friends over on Direwolf City who are starting their stream right about now. And Radio Westeros will be streaming tomorrow. Maura Lee sends a super chat, says sending love and hugs. Thank you, Maura. Maura sent a bunch of great questions in, but a lot of them were spoilery, so we'll tackle those another time. We'll certainly get to them, though. They shan't be forgotten. And definitely, folks, join our Discord or Facebook if you want to keep the discussion going outside of the live streams.
If you want to join Discord, the link is on our website, or you can just go to bit.ly/howdiscord. Yeah. Easy for you.
Follow Sean and Ashea on Twitter. That's at MyreneseNot for Ashea and at Dancing Sean for Sean.
I'm on TikTok now, too.
Ooh. Yeah, Sean is.
Are we there? Yeah.
And so are we. We're at The History of Westeros on TikTok, and Sean is at Dancing Sean on TikTok. I asked Sean, I was like, he told me he's on TikTok, and I said, oh, what's your username? And he said, at Dancing Sean. And I said, oh, wow, how could I not have guessed?
Are you surprised?
Okay. I could have looked you up. We got another super chat, too, last minute from Jill47 with a thanks sticker.
All right. Appreciate that, Jill.
Yeah.
Thank you. You can also leave us a review if you've enjoyed our coverage this season, or you enjoy our book coverage, or you're looking forward to that. You can leave that on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. That'll work out. Or just give us a like if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah, if you've been checking us out for the first time because of House of the Dragon, or you're just rejoining us or whatever, we do cover things throughout the off season, and we will be covering both House of the Dragon and A Song of Ice and Fire and Blood related topics.
Yep.
So I
check
hope
out our back catalog.
I hope you check out our back catalog and you stick around during the off season, because there'll be lots of exciting news throughout this time. I personally enjoy the off season, like I enjoy the casting season part of the season the most. Like that's when I feel the most fired up about the show. Like I don't know what it is, I just love
seeing who the early stages of how these characters coming to life.
Yeah, it always gets me really excited. And then
you kind of build up to it. You're like, okay, now we know who the person is. We don't know what they're going to look like in the role exactly. We don't know exactly what they're going to do.
But you get see edits that people make where they take the actor and they make them look like, like there's just so many different stages of the casting process. So I'm pretty excited to get into like filming leaks and stuff like that.
Must be nice. trying to stay unspoiled. I keep all
you can't do that. You can't be like, who is this character? Or like, I don't know this person's name. Yeah.
I love covering in different topics that we do, just to different places and locations and time periods and finding real world parallels and symbolism that George has used. And I love all that stuff. But I love when this show is out, because I feel like there's just this huge communal discourse. I really love the idea of people around the world from all walks coming in to I don't know.
This is a great
air their
thing.
grievances
Yeah.
and get their takes. And
Is this Festivus or something?
You are describing Festivus.
It's coming up. Yeah.
That's great.
Who wants to arm wrestle?
I got a lot of problems with you people. Yes, everyone. Thank you very much. It's the end of this chapter, but it is not the end of the story. Thanks again. We will keep an eye on our social media for updates on our schedule. Come next Monday for the Halloween stream and for our episode the following Monday. We've got a lot more to come. Thanks, everybody. You know what to do. Valar read us and Valar re-watch us.